Hello and welcome to the Silent Evil Podcast. I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
And I am Cameron.
And we're back with a double dosage of Resident Evil, but the Resident Evil Revelations. Going with the second one this time because it felt like we were playing the first one and it's like, we're already going through this first one. Let's just go right into that second one. And lo and behold, I haven't played this game in such a long time that I couldn't remember exactly how much it tied into the first one, and it doesn't tie in very much.
No, at all.
Just
I mean,
barely. There's really one character moment that kind of goes like, oh yeah, that connected there, and other than that, that's it.
Yep.
You know, and I did see something like just a little bit of research was that like when Capcom did announce it, they had to explain that people were like, well, we're using the Revelations title. It's a sequel to the first one. It's supposed to be just like other stories that fill in the gaps between the major series. I'm like, oh, okay. Sure, okay.
But that's what sucks, like right off the bat. I mean, like back, like when we were playing through the original Revelations, like one of my first things upon completing that game is just like, how does the story end? Because it leaves you on this cliffhanger, and you're like, bro, I don't think this like Rev 2 doesn't have anything to do with, like they're in the same universe and like roughly kind of same timeline ish, but yeah, no, but I mean, I think in general, like, I enjoyed Revelations 2 for reasons that we'll get into, but I still think like the first game just like holds I don't know, maybe because it was like designed for the DS thing and whatnot, like I don't know, it still is like a very special game, even like comparatively between the two. I think Rev 1 was really good, so but.
Yeah, well, in playing them back to back, because I kind of thought about one, I probably hadn't played Revelations 2 since it came out on PS3, like just
right.
to let alone how long ago that was. But playing them back to back, it's kind of like that one where like they're both good. Don't get me wrong, I like both of them a lot. But Revelations 1 is just that one's really special. Like I think that one like stands up to like the mainline series of Resident Evils and so on like that. Like I think that's just really good overall. The story, the characters, just like the fun factor in it and so on like that. And once again, Revelations 2 is good. Don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's just not maybe as legendary feeling as that. Is the first one.
Well, I'd say like without getting into anything story or spoiler wise or anything like that, I just think that like in general, Revelations 2 is a very good story written about Barry Burton and Claire Redfield with some ancillary characters. The game dove so much harder into those character arcs and their like character building basically. Like I know Claire better now, I know Barry better now, but in the like grand scheme of Resident Evil, like I didn't get much out of this other than, oh hey, Albert's got a fucking crazy ass sister, so, but again, we'll get into it. But.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's actually is one of the cool things about Revelations too, though, is I mean the fact that you get to play as being played as Claire's cool, but she's been in 2, she's been in Code Veronica. It's cool to see her come back. I always think the coolest part is because you get to play as Barry, because before the only other games Barry's in, of course, Resident Evil 1, but he's not like the playable character. He's in that Resident Evil Gaiden for Game Boy Color, so he's there. But like beyond that, though, it's like I felt like they've never really used Barry too much, and this was sort of the first time I was like, no, here Barry's a main character. You get to play as him, and all this good stuff. And I think that's kind of the coolest takeaway of it. And funny enough is when playing through the game, story-wise, you kind of get when you start this game off, it feels like it's more of a Claire game first, Barry second. But I feel as it goes on, it becomes no, it's Barry first. You were just led in by Claire because everybody kind of knows her more, but it's way more of a Barry story than anything else.
Yep. And like I said, I mean, like the number one thing that they did so well in terms of character development is Barry Burton. Like I feel anyways, really early on, upon my first like hour or two of playing, I text you and I was just like, I'm getting Last of Us vibes out of this, dude. Cause like, it feels like a Joel and Ellie story, between him and the little girl, so, but anyways, yeah, I mean, again, character development wise, I think the game's stellar. I thought it was really cool. It's really cool to get to know these characters better, understand their wants and ambitions and, like goals and things like that. Like there's a human behind, especially like you're talking about, like with Barry, like there's a human behind Barry. He's not just the oh, you almost became a Joe sandwich, you know, like very like monotoned and, you know, like, I don't know. It's cool. It's cool to see the development of those characters.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned that Last of Us thing too. But if you really think about it, this game comes right after The Last of Us has kind of just came out and so on like that. Because it like if you compare just Revelations 1 to 2, it's a drastic kind of change in like formula, sort of.
Yeah.
Where Revelations 1, they're both in the survival horror category, of course, but where Revelations 1 still kind of has like the anime sort of feel to it. You know, the characters are a little bit more slightly over the top, you know, things are more colorful and everything like that. Where Revelations 2 falls in that like time period where it's like, no, everything's these drab grays, browns.
Yeah.
I always picture Gears of War to me always feels like the thing that kind of set that in motion. I know there's probably games beforehand that really kind of did that, but Gears really established that. But then you see that of a lot of stuff. Last of Us uses that. The Tomb Raider, like the third reboot series, uses that. There's a bunch of games like that. So it's like Revelations 2 is in that same category of that kind of style where, and I think that's kind of it, is like it's cool because you're this old like Soviet base and so on from back in the day that was turned into a laboratory and it was an old mining facility and so on, but like literally everything in it is browns, grays, you know, muted reds and so on like that, you know, where I think that's why if you compare just both the games together, like Revelations 1 actually kind of like I think stands out and almost looks a little bit better, even though it's got the handheld graphics, you know, because they just pop a little bit more. Where this one, you know, in the time period, you would never even thought anything of it. You played it when it came out on PS3 or whatnot, or, you know, even just very early days PS4 and Xbox One. But yeah, as over time though, it's like those colors they kind of blend together. It's not bad, but they blend and they don't make the setting stand out as much.
Oh yeah, it's an extremely drab setting comparatively to like the more kind of hyper crisp graphics of the first game. Again, like I think a lot of that boils down to its 3DS nature, you know, of like it's limited by its hardware. This game has a shit ton more depth and has a lot more like in terms of its graphics, like a lot more clarity. It was obviously designed for, you know, the Xbox 360 PS3 generation of hardware. It's a noticeable uplift graphically from the original game, but you do get those muted tones. You get that same like because this game came out in 2015, right?
I think so. Yeah, because it technically came out when PS4 and Xbox One were out, but it was one of those ones where you could tell it's pretty much it's made for 360 and PS3. They just happened to put it like a slightly like, you know, the version that ran at 1080p instead of 720p. You know, like that's like the only major difference probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think another thing that I noticed like right off the bat is just like just even like cloth materials, you know, like as you're moving around your character, their body movements, you know, the hair, you know, is like, you know, flowing in the wind and whatnot. It's not like as hyper detailed as something like a Unreal Engine 5 game of today, you know, looks like, but you know, comparatively to the first game where Jill's hair was like a clump, you know, of like, you know, a ponytail, you know, or whatever. And it had a little bit of sway and movement to it and whatnot. But like, again, and I'm like getting nitpicky at this point, but, you know, seeing Rev 2, again, just like the level of detail that they added to this game is phenomenal comparatively. I think it's a stylistic choice, you know, on whether or not you would prefer the original versus the sequel. I think both are good in general. I personally prefer the originals, kind of in the sense of like I was getting lost often in this game. I think a big portion of it, yet again, a map problem, but having to find maps, you know, like. But to its credit, before you grab a physical map in game that gives you your little mini map up in the upper right corner, it brought a feeling of dread. It brought a feeling of like, I don't know exactly where I'm going. Like I don't have this crutch to lean on and it brought a scare factor to it. You know, like ultimately is what that boiled down to is like the horror is actually here in this game. There were points in the original game where horror was there, but because you have your map and because like you have all these like crutches, you know, like the map in general, I never felt like scared, you know, in Rev 1. But this game, like there's some genuinely scary parts, you know, that were just like, holy shit, I don't know what I'm going up against. I don't know what's around this corner. So
yeah, I will definitely say you jump a lot in this game. You know, just things will come out and zombies will jump from like the ceiling that you didn't notice they were going to come on down from. There's a lot of cool stuff here. And the fact that they even do bring back zombies and all that kind of stuff to give it kind of more of a classic vibe, and then they sort of evolve more into like the bioweapon mutant things as time goes on is kind of cool and so on. But yeah, they definitely, because especially just making the game darker, making it seem just kind of more like brutal, and these like weird mutations and so on like that. And you could almost say maybe a little bit less cartoony. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing about Revelations 1, but Revelations 1, as I said, it has the feeling like if it was a Resident Evil anime, and that's not a bad thing, but like that's totally how it kind of feels, and I actually personally like that quite a bit. Where this one's kind of going a little bit, you can almost see the start of where they have like the more Americanized look coming into play. It's still got a bit of the anime-ness in here, but you can see it starting to lean in that direction, you know?
Yep. No, I fully agree. I think the other thing that really took me by surprise to this game is like just how the differences between it and its predecessor, like with like gunplay feels like slightly different, movement feels slightly different. There's updated things like now with it kind of feels like they mix something of the effect of like Resident Evil 0 with its partner system into something that plays like Resident Evil 6 in terms of like gunplay and movement and things like that. And it's like this weird mishmash of like different RE like I don't know, design ideals that are just like mismatched into this one thing. And I think they actually did a pretty good job at it. We'll get to it when we get to like mechanics and whatnot, but there's like a handful of things that I was kind of like about. But for the most part, like I think this game pretty much nails like its gameplay, its aesthetic, its pacing is very good too. And so like the first game, like I recorded every single episode, and it was a really cool format for YouTube because you have these small little 20-45 minute chunks of like gameplay that you can upload. This one, like I started to record, but its structure and like how you do part of an act with Claire and Moira, and then you do another part of an act with Barry and I keep forgetting the little girl's name. What's the little girl's name? Natalia, yeah. And because of that, I didn't really feel like I had like a solid structure, because this is my first time ever playing this game, of course, so like I didn't feel like I had like a really solid structure to record, so I opted not to. But I also feel like I took a lot more time in this version instead of like feeling rushed because I'm recording, and like not wanting to produce bad gameplay for people to watch, And so,
well, that's the only downfall. So the second that you hit record, it changes sort of the way you go about playing a game. Like you won't do that thing with it. Like, if you're just playing by yourself, you'd be like, I'm gonna go take a look at this room over here. Kind of look around, which would just be kind of seem aimless to like someone's watching. Like, what's he doing? Like, keeps checking that room. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, so, yeah. And I just kind of record some of the stuff there too, but it's like, it is kind of weird because it's like, in a sense there's 4 episodes, and then they're split between a Claire and a Barry one. So it makes for like, in a sense, 8 chapters in total, / 2 bonus DLC ones. But I almost feel like they could have split things up a little bit more, kind of like the way that they did in, once again, Revelations 1, where, I know this is the way they sort of sold it, but like you could have still sold it as the episodes. There's 4 episodes, and that was one of the interesting things that Capcom did, is that they literally sold this beforehand. Before they sold the physical version, they tried that thing where they're literally selling these like episodes, like where you buy like DLC,
right?
And I always feel that's one of those things is like, that's fine for a game, like an indie company that can't really maybe afford to put out stuff like that. When you are kind of a major, like literally like one of the biggest companies of all time, it seems kind of weird, and I think that strategy, like I remember I just did a thing like, the physical version is going to come out like in a month. I'll just wait for you. I'll let you finish your game. That was just how I looked at it.
And that's what's wild about it too, is that it's only 4 episodes, and they did weekly releases. So they like launched the game over the course of a month from the research that I did. And it's like why? Like, why not make this like a, 8 or 12 part or something, and still do like the multi-story, multi-universe, not multi-universe, but like, like the multi-story within universe type thing, where episode 1 through 4 is exactly what we got, but episodes, 5 through, whatever, follow a different character or character plot or something. I think that they could have had a lot of really good success with that type of formula if they would have continued it. But I think if I was playing the game at that time, picked up episode 1, I don't know if I would have picked up the other ones just because of that type of format. I'm glad that it came in a complete package, the version that I have, so it's just back to back to back, and you roll through it. And there still is like this game has the previously on versus like end of episode and whatnot, and you get your like your post screen and your scores and all that. It makes sense here. Where it's confusing in the first game is that game launched whole. Yeah,
so, yeah.
But
and granted too, it's like, as I said, you only had to wait a month, and then they put the physical version out.
Right.
Maybe just a fraction more than that. Because I remember that's all I did. Is it was like, yeah, I'll wait for your game to be finished, and then I went out and bought the PS3 version when it first came out, and the disc had everything on it when it first came out.
Yeah, well, it almost feels like an early access period or something. Kind of like how, I mean, obviously there's early access games on Steam right now, but like kind of like how like pre-order incentives have been recently, like gain access 3 days prior and blah blah blah, stuff like that. Like it feels like the precursor to stuff like that, So,
well, I definitely think it was that thing. It was a very experimental. There's a lot of experimenting going on in this game, and I mean, it's the perfect game to do it with. You know what I mean? You're not, if you kind of ruin any of it, it's not bad. One thing that I thought was a strange one, and this is something that I thought was weird for Capcom to do, and this is one of those weird things that kind of it screws games over all the time when they do this. But the game came out it was only $40 when it first came out. Okay. And the downfall is it's a weird thing that like you would think that like, oh, I'm saving, $20 off a game, like I'm getting a hell of a deal, this is great. But instead what it does in the consumer's eyes, it just makes me go like, what's wrong with that game? Why is it $20 off? It's probably not that good, because I've seen Sega make that same problem too, and it's like, you could have just sold this for a normal price game, and for some reason you tried to undercut it, and it almost like kind of got you. And I felt like that kind of happened with this game when it came out too, because it made people look at it like it was just some lesser game, like, it's not a real Resident Evil or something like that. It's $40. Like it's probably like a glorified demo or something. When realistically it's like, when you finish the game, it's technically longer than Revelations 1. Like the playtime along with the DLCs is probably at least 8+ hours.
Oh yeah. Yep. And that's one of the things that I noticed like playing is so I restarted the game twice over. I started on the harder difficulty, really wasn't feeling it. Started it again, and then I had that like brief stint of like not being able to play for 3 or 4 days or whatever, and then like going in for the third run and being like, okay, I'm going to start to finish this, the nightly, daily, like whatever, just to get through it, and not to like press myself to go through it, but more to just stay engaged with this story, because I feel like it's the type of game that you almost do have to play start to finish, outside, I mean, at least mid episode, because I can't tell you the amount of times like I would start, like finish Claire's part of the episode, start Barry's, get, a little ways into his thing or whatever, have to stop and then come back. And then like the checkpoints in this game, it's one of the mechanics that I just hate. Like the checkpoints in this game suck. Like, like why isn't there just even a save feature or something, like a safe room, something, I had to restart episodes like multiple times, because it just didn't save when I thought it should have saved,
Yeah.
So I think that's an artificial inflation to my playtime. Like currently I'm looking at it right now. In total, I had 13.1 hours, probably, like you said, 8 to 9 of that is probably actual like playing the game, going episode to episode. So yeah, that's about right.
Well, and that's the one thing, going all the way back to kind of the initial start of talking about these episodes, is they release them in 4 parts, and they're like, that's cool in itself. I think what they needed to do though is they should have broke the episodes up into more chapters, like once again like Revelations 1 did, because the thing is The first one actually plays really smooth. The first, like in a sense, your initial one, which once again, Capcom actually gave that out for free the first chapter. So that was like the bait and trying to get people hooked on it. But that one is literally like 45-minute story for Claire, 45-minute story for Barry. Perfect. Each one's, kind of split then there. If you want to take a break at the Claire section, that's cool. But then the other ones, the time frame's way different on them. Like some of them are like 2 hours long for Claire, and an hour and a half for Barry and so on like that, which by that point you're like, well, gosh, if it's running at this length, you might as well break it up into like maybe half an hour chunks.
Oh, yeah.
Then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you don't if you have a weird save and continue thing and so on like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I definitely agree. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the fix would be. Like I said, I'm just glad that it's like I got to play it in the version that is complete. And when I sat down to play it and finally told myself, you're gonna play through this whole thing, I did it, and it felt fine. Like at that point, I guess like starting into this, coming right off the heels of the original Revelations, like I was a little. Maybe like a little apathetic to starting this like immediately, right after. But at the same time, like it's a continuation of, like what this podcast is roughly about, with the Silent Evil theme and whatnot. So stoked that I have another Resident Evil under my belt at this point, because there's good talking points with this title, so.
Well, and that's the thing is like this one. It feels like this is the game that like it has a lot of those like light nitpicky things in it, but I don't think that takes away from like the overall game. The overall game is still a pretty solid one. This used to be one of those ones too. I remember because at this time period, this is when the era where people were starting to jump ship again from Resident Evil, and it's kind of because of 5 and 6 because they just didn't like the emphasis on action and so on. I used to be like, hey, you should check out Revelations 1 and 2. Like they literally kind of give you classic survival horror vibes and all that kind of stuff there. I mean, that's literally how Capcom made these games. They said, hey, we're making 5 and 6 this to sell to like a big audience, but we'll make Revelations 1 and 2 to sell to our old fashioned audience.
Right.
Right. So it's like it is kind of cool that they were kind of doing both at the same time, and if you really like Resident Evil, you'll like them all and so on. And this one here definitely has a lot of that like classic horror thrown in there. They put some puzzles in. They put a couple challenging puzzles where like one of my episodes was inflated by like 25 minutes because I was trying to figure out which stupid statue it was. Yep. Because I read the instructions like by like a different way of looking at it. But it's like they have all kinds of cool stuff in there like that. And one of the big features, I guess, we probably should mention this because this is what, like, I think changes a lot of it, is they have a co-op feature in it, which sounds like it should be awesome because that's what you want in Revelations 1. I feel like that's the only, if there's one major thing kind of missing from that game, and I get it, it's a 3DS game initially, but it's like, I think that game would have been so cool being co-op just like Resident Evil 5, 100%. Especially if you had the, I just picture it on the 3DS, if each person had their own 3DS too, it's like, oh, that'd be so cool. But this game gives you co-op, but they give you the strangest kind of co-op, you think about it. It's like, okay, so one person plays as Claire. Claire can use guns. She's your normal Resident Evil character. You gotta do that. And then, the other person plays as Moira, and then vice versa. It's Barry and then the little girl, Natalia. And the weird thing is that when you're playing as the second player character, Moira, or Natalia, you don't have any guns. You just kind of barely have a melee attack, but then you also have like other little abilities you have too, where like, you have flashlight so you can see items or see certain things in the dark, / if you're Natalia, you can see monsters and stuff before they come. Yeah. It reminds me like it's almost designed to be for that friend or even for like, maybe like a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever who didn't really play video games too much, but they like to watch Resident Evil. It kind of gave them like, well, here's the thing. You can still watch me play it, but you actually have a character that will kind of help out in some weird kind of way. You can find items for me. You can maybe give me, you can save me if I get like grabbed or something like that. And, but if you played it with two of your like gamer friends, it's like somebody's getting so screwed over.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, the player 2 of this game is very much just, it's a support character. It's the healer of the raid. It's the, it's like, it's that type of stature. And it's actually one thing that kind of bummed me out. And if we want to get into, co-op side of this thing. So as you're playing, majority of the time I played as Barry or Claire because you have the guns why not? You know, because like when you're playing is like I'll just speak about Moira in general. Moira, you know, you get a flashlight. She can walk around the levels, point her flashlight around. She's the one that's able to locate items that are hidden in the level. And the only way to identify them is to aim down sights with your flashlight. You narrow down your little scope thing, and it like, you know, brightens up the little, you know, glittery thing or whatever. And it's like, cool, now I can pick this thing up. So that's like one of her features. She gets a crowbar, so she does have like a little bit of practical use to where they do add some like extremely light puzzle elements to this where, you know, oh, there's a locked door with a, you know, piece of wood across it. Oh, gotta switch over to Moira now and, you know, bust the door open so I can switch back to Claire and continue. And then like what else could she really do? Like there's really not
that's
much.
about it. Other than that, she's a glorified pack mule that's going to carry your extra items.
Now, well, yeah, and that's a whole other thing too. Is like the second character feels more like I loaded Claire with all weapons and ammo. My support character literally carried everything else. You know, like I mean, she carried all the health items. She carried all the, you know, like the you know, gunpowders and, you know, just random shit that you would pick up, you know, throughout the game and whatnot that's craftable and all that. The interesting part though is so anyway, so that's Moira. Natalia has like a pretty interesting mechanic where it's very much like, again, very fucking Last of Us, where it's like when you crouch and like you can see enemies like through walls, you know, or like their aura or whatever. And like it's so funny because my son's watching me play this and they put a brown texture in. And my son is just constantly like, he's watching me play this and I'm playing as Natalia and I'm looking through walls and there's just like these like brown flowy, like, you know, misty looking things, you know, and my dad's just like, Dad, do the zombies stink or something in this game? They look like they're stinky.
Like Linus or something like that from like Snoopy.
You know? Yeah, exactly. You know, like he just thought they like, he's like, Dad, do they fart or something? Like, what's all the brown stuff? Like,
well, they probably are stinky. Let's be honest. If you came up to them and close up, they're not going to smell good.
So is that what Natalia is doing? Is like just has like this insane sense of smell that just like, you know, you can see shit through walls.
But it's just Wesker's fused her with like a dog.
Yeah, something like that. But inevitably what happens is, and this is the downside to this type of, I don't know, co-op, I guess. So as a solo player, you're able to switch back and forth between these characters freely, which is cool. But inevitably what would happen is like I would enter a brand new area, walk through a new door or whatever. I would run the entirety of the level, or at least that zone where I'm in, you know, like that section. I would run the entirety of it with Claire or Barry, clear the whole map of all threats, you know, and then I would switch over to the support character, and I'm like, and I would just clear the whole area again just to check for all items and whatnot. And it's kind of annoying because like in other Resident Evil games, like 4, like 5, like blah blah blah, any character can pick up any item, you know, like they're just in the world. More often than not, they're just like an actual item in the world. Like you actually have a physical grenade, you know, sitting on a shelf or whatever, where this game's like, it's just a glint, you know, it's just a little shimmer, you know, that you have to, with Natalia, like point your finger at it and go like, Barry, it's there, you know, or like, you know, or Moira with her flashlight, you know. So it brought a bit of annoyance. And again, I think artificial inflation of playtime was like the ultimate problem I had with it.
Well, you know, it's that thing because, you know, they have the scanner in Revelations 1, which is kind of it's good because you get more ammo and health, but then at the same time, it's kind of like it does make you go into every single room and you have to scan, or you always have to pull that thing out, you know, because God forbid you're going to miss something, you know. Yep. So it's kind of the same thing here, but this is the weird thing is I will say, though this co-op is kind of a strange one, it's almost the ideal way that if you played it co-op, though, you'll get the full experience and kind of the way it is, because then you're not doing that double run. Because, you know, if you run to a room, say you're playing as Claire and I'm playing as Moira, you can run to the room, you can shoot zombies. I can just kind of be like, just aimlessly looking for stuff, trying to open doors while you're, you know, doing all like the hard work and so on. Because when this game did come out, okay, I played it through by myself. And then I remember like I played a second round and I had my buddy Kyle come over and I just had him play as Claire and Barry. I'm like, I'll play as, since I already played through it once, I'll play through it that way. And that does kind of work. But it's a weird one though. It's like, once again, I couldn't imagine inviting my friend over and being like, well, I'm playing as Claire. You can be Moira. like the dick friend thing to do.
Right.
As I said, like, if you don't know what it is, like what you're getting into, it's a strange one. The only other thing I can think of is this, like, if it's made for those people who either don't play much video games / well, you gotta play somewhat video games or else you won't be able to understand the twin sticks part. Right. Or let's just say you're just not really into horror games, but you want to kind of be slightly involved. I don't know. It's a weird one. It's a very niche audience that I felt like that was designed for.
No, again, I think you absolutely nailed it on the head. It's quote unquote the girlfriend character. It's the healer of the raid. It's the, you know, like it's the support character more or less, you know. There's nothing wrong with it per se. I just didn't enjoy it, you know. I didn't enjoy playing as either of those characters. I like the characters themselves. I thought the characters were cool, but yeah, the physically playing as them just really didn't do it for me, you know. I couldn't imagine like Moira having her own game with just a flashlight, you know. One cool mechanic about her though is that I did enjoy, like, at least with the flashlight thing, like the whole blinding thing. So like you aim down with your flashlight or whatever, and as long as you point it at their face, you know, like a zombie's face or an enemy's face or whatever, like they would go blind and they would like hold their hands up and they slow way down or whatever. The problem is that early on in the game, prior to the next thing that I'll mention, you know, you don't have a ton of options. Like when you're playing as Moira, like Claire's kind of dumb. Like she doesn't do a whole lot until you get into later game when you actually have a bunch of these battle points and whatnot, and you're starting to upgrade. The skill system in this game is sick. It's so good. You know.
Well, I think you actually have to even get the skill that makes Claire or Barry shoot when they're played by the computer, which is kind of goofy. You know. Because I'll say this once again, though, it's like, now, if you're playing this game on a really hard mode and you had two, you know, hardcore gamer friends playing together, see, that's where the Moira stuff could come in handy, because you could use her to blind the zombies. Claire could use like, you know, you can use some real tactics there that could make the battle, you know, pretty neat. And same even with Natalia, you could just do that where you could literally, you know, find the enemies, kind of keep an eye out and all that stuff and so on like that. There is some tactics that could be used, but once again, both players have to be really in on this. And I think that's the thing about it, though, is it's like, once again, it's such a niche kind of like style. Cool, but like, you know, almost in a sense, I almost kind of think the game almost would have been kind of slightly better just as a single player, non-co-op one, and then Natalia and Moira just kind of run on their own. They're just there to help out, you know. So like if Claire gets attacked, she just automatically comes by and hits him with the crowbar. She automatically finds items in a sense. Like that'd be kind of cool. Like, hey, Claire, I found this. Barry, I found this. Like one of those kind of things.
Yep. I mean, just treat it like Sheva from RE5. I mean, like straight up, you know, like that's probably like one of the better in most games, I would say. Like Sheva is probably like one of the more better AI companions, you know, to run alongside Chris throughout that experience. What I really like though is they didn't lean terribly too heavy into it, but some of the split sections where like you're playing as Barry and you know, like you come up against like a locked door and you can't get through it. So you switch to the little girl and, oh, there's a little hole in the wall over there that she can climb through. And now she can go through, she goes through like a maze puzzle thing, you know, or whatever to like open that door for Barry. They use that sparingly, but it is tasteful. Like I did enjoy that. And again, that's kind of where my thoughts about like the comparison direct against RE0 is, you know, is because that game went heavy ham, you know, with you know, the switching of characters and doing puzzles at the same time. Actually very thought-provoking puzzles. But in this particular game, like I said, the puzzles were light, but I'm glad that exists. You know, it felt cool when you were doing like the sections where you have to play as Moira to go open the door for Claire or whatever, you know, or go do the puzzle so Claire can advance or vice versa. You know, like I think all that's really cool, you know.
Yeah, and I think those are those modes too that, like, once again, if you were playing 2-player co-op, that does make kind of a difference as well too. Like it does kind of add to like some tension, and you could have one person cover the other and so on. There's even moments too that like this is a little bit farther in the it's like maybe the third chapter or something like that. But there's a part where like there's a door and you're being chased by the guy who's shooting the fireballs out of like the kettle thing. And when you're playing it one player, you can't really do it this way, but you could literally almost do that thing where you distract the guy with Claire while the other one would go as Moira run and try to unlock that door where she has to pry it with the crowbar. But, you know, once again, if you're playing it like one player, there's not really a way you're going to properly do that, or else you're kind of just going to, you know, you're going to switch back and forth and then get smacked or something like that because, wherever the heck you end up at. But I picture that being kind of like, no, there's some tactics that you could use if you and a buddy were playing this exactly.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so I think in general, like the co-op side of this, it's kind of hit and miss for me. It's fine. It's like it's totally fine to exist the way that it does. There is some value to it. In most scenarios, though, I didn't really play as a support character. I didn't feel the need to. I didn't feel the want to. Outside of, oh shit, Claire's low on ammo. I need to go find ammo. You know, and I have to use this character to do that. So. You know, like moving forward, if they ever were to do a Rev 3, I'd love to see the mechanic return, but I'd like to see it be a bit more fleshed out than this version was. It feels like if they do a Rev 3 and they keep this co-op thing, make it to where you start off with abilities like you do have roughly about midway through this game. Because once you have enough of those battle points to upgrade your characters enough, or at least their skill sets enough to be a little more proficient, like you mentioned, the fact that you have to spend points just for your AI companion to even shoot their gun is kind of dumb. You know, like, I mean, maybe make it more like, you know, Claire can shoot her gun by default as an AI companion, but I'm going to upgrade her damage over time, you know, or something to that effect. Like that would have been a lot more tasteful, you know. So, but again, the skill system is cool. I really enjoyed, like, especially like the format of what it is, because you have like all these multiple categories across, and then everything like drops down from there and it tiers and it gets more expensive as you come down. The design of that, just like UI wise, was like very well done. I like that there's like multiple tiers of certain types of things. So like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I'll just use like
healing or, you know, how much damage you do with, like, say, the knife and so on like that. They all have like a increase. Like you can level them up like 1, 2, and 3. Excuse me.
Yeah. So that made the co-op experience more worth it to me, because by the end of the game, like, Moira can actually attack. Like you can hit with the crowbar and like you'll actually do damage, you know, or you put them into a stagger state and then, you know, like switch over to Claire and then do your finishing move or whatever, you know, like there's cool features in the game like that based around skills. And skills was probably like mechanic wise was, at least between this co-op thing, was definitely like the highlight of my experience, you know, is once I started unlocking a lot of those things, I thought it was super cool.
Well, and the weird thing too is based on that skill list too, they really want you to switch back and forth quite often, because there's a handful of skills in there that's like, oh, when you switch back and forth, you have like a 5 or 10 second period where you'll do more damage with the pistol or with the guns, and then vice versa with, like, you know, Moira's crowbar and so on like that. So you have, or like, you know, be ones like, there'll be things like where you switch back, you know, and you get like invincibility for like 5 seconds or something like that, and so on like that. So there is like a things that they kind of want. They don't want you just to hang on to one character and just like play as them like 90% of the time.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they were kind of hoping you'd switch back and forth. Or I don't know how that works if you're playing co-op, obviously, because you can't switch back.
Yeah.
But you know, some of
I
those.
actually wonder how that would work.
I can't remember if, like, when you're playing co-op, if you can actually switch back and forth, like, oh, you can be Claire for a bit and I'll be Claire for a bit and so on like that. I really don't remember it being like that. I really remember it being like one person's Claire and the other person's the other characters. You know, it's been a good moment since I played this game last in a, you know, split screen co-op. But yeah.
Yep. Yeah. To touch on the PC version, because which version did you play again?
So I went through on the PS4 version.
Okay.
There's one of those games where I had it on PS3 and then I rebought it on PS4.
Gotcha.
And so that's the one I just went back to, and I was like, okay, yeah. So the upside, I guess, for me is because I remember you talked about how some of those levels restarted. Well, since I was playing on the PlayStation 4 version or whatever, or PS5, it would just like wherever I left off at. So if I left off mid-level, I could just kind of, you know, exit the game. And as long as I didn't start up another game, I would just load me right back where I was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the PC version is pretty much your standard. It's more or less like the first game. There's a handful of more like features, I'd say, like upscaling type stuff and whatnot. You can get this game looking pretty damn good. Like I was pretty impressed with it. It still won't, and not that I would expect a game of this age to do this, but it doesn't scale in ultra wide. It's still 16:9. I got my black bars, on either side and whatnot. But again, it's fine. Same thing, linked up to the PlayStation controller just fine, via Bluetooth on Steam. Like everything just works, out of the box in this game. I really didn't have any crash. I think I had one crash. I don't even remember what it was. But I remember like I had one crash, and then outside of that, like everything else was just solid. Granted, I have a really decent PC, but 120 frames locked solid the entire run, like regardless what's going on in any given scene. Never saw any frame dips, never saw anything like that. So it was actually like very well made for the PC. And I think the other notable thing to talk about with this game, before we get into like story and plot and characters and all that other stuff, is that this is the final game that came out for the Resident Evil franchise that was built on the MT framework engine. This is true, yeah. This is directly before RE7 with the RE engine,
Yeah. So this is kind of the last of that mid-generation of Resident Evils. Yeah, that makes total sense and so on.
Yeah.
And yeah. No, that's it. Well, because there's a lot of especially in this one too, especially if you play the raid mode, which is really cool in this one too as well. There's a lot of Resident Evil 6 stuff in here because it comes right at. I think it's literally the same year that Resident Evil 6 came out, or 6 months later or something like that. It's not that much farther.
Yeah, it was within it was within a year from what I read. Yeah,
so there's a lot of stuff kind of tied in there and so on like that. A lot of similar, raid levels and so on. But one thing I'm gonna say before we get just any further, control wise, I will say this game does do one of those things that like and this was popular for a while. It works in certain games, but not all games. Where they used to do that thing where they made crouch is L3. Which I hate that because the second that you panic, you know like, oh god, something's coming, your character starts to crouch because you push down on the joystick a little too hard, and you can't change the controls in this game because I wanted to try to get that off and you can't do that. And I was like, that is one of the, like, for the most part the controls are pretty decent in this one. They do have a really weird one too where like square and X are both used as action buttons for different things. And once again, I think that was an experiment thing to see like, is it easier if you like, certain things are this and that so you don't accidentally press one or the other. But I felt like that was kind of goofy. I feel like it should have been just pick one action button. You don't need two action buttons. I don't know why you have two action buttons.
Completely unnecessary.
That and the L3 thing when you're doing the crouch, that would get me so many times where it's just you mean the run and you crouched. You panicked and now like your aim's off because you crouched. Even though the game does have a perk though where when you crouch and shoot you do more damage. So I guess that's probably how they made up for it. They're like, well, here's the thing. If you crouch and shoot, it's gonna be better.
Right. Yeah, the crouch got me killed a few times. Absolutely. I'm trying to even remember what is the sprint button in this game.
So sprint, I think you have to hold X because it's weird because I think this is the first game that has. Well, no, Resident Evil 6 has a sprint. So this and Resident Evil 6 have sprint, which I want to say sprint is. I could be wrong.
No, you're right. No, you're right. It's the X button or A on PC or whatever, but. Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing I will say too is, you remember how we were talking about the dodge mechanic in Revelations 1 and everything like that? I do feel like this one almost like answers like your cause for the dodge thing and gives you actually a pretty smooth dodge style in it. Which of course the very first time I went to dodge, I dodged like Revelations 1, went right into the enemy.
Yep, of course.
I went forward in circle. It was like, well, oh yeah, I gotta dodge out of the way in this game.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I'd say, controls in general, I think are great. I really didn't have too much problem with it. It absolutely got rid of I had made a comment in the Rev 1 episode about, like the stiffness of Jill or any character in that game for that matter, because it's like they allow you to use twin stick shooting, like camera with right stick, movement with left stick, strafing, the whole works and whatnot. But it's like that game just didn't like it. It didn't want you to play that way. It wanted you to play like original RE4 or RE5, where you have like more or less tank controls, semi, like with over the shoulder shooting and whatnot. Whereas this game just felt like extremely fluid. That's probably the one thing that I will say that I noticed right off the bat was like, holy shit, like I can strafe and aim and shoot and turn all at the same time without it feeling like I'm moving a fucking refrigerator or something,
Yeah.
It felt good. It felt really good.
And that's the same way Resident Evil 6 has really smooth controls in it too. So both these games have that. And once again, I think with Revelations 1 on the 3DS, I know that they released the Circle Pad Pro, but they assumed that like most people are probably not going to buy that right off the bat. Yeah. So it was designed more in a Resident Evil 4 kind of mechanic, classic tank controls, all that stuff. But yeah, no, this one for the most part plays pretty darn smooth, other than that silly L3 position for crouch. Yep. It's just that button could be realistically like. The run button should be L3, and the crouch could be anywhere. It could be X or something. I don't really care.
Yeah.
Whatever button you're not going to use for action.
Right. And I'd be curious. I'll have to go back in and see if there's actual keybinds or whatnot on the PC version. I never changed my keybinds at all, so I'm not sure if that exists or not in this game. But I would just straight up switch them for like crouch needs to be circle, and sprint is L3. I think you just switch those two controls and it'd be fine.
Yeah. The bummer thing is I noticed on the PS4 one there wasn't, because I tried to switch it.
Yeah.
So
well, that's pretty common with console, anyways. I mean, like some games will allow you to, but not nearly as much as like. I mean, even in general, like. On PC, if I really wanted to, I could download like a third-party piece of software.
Yeah, you get Joy to Con, or Joy to Key or whatever. That's the one that I always think I use. Because I use it for you have to use it for a lot of older games, anyways, to get them to work with the controller. But yeah.
So yeah. I don't know. Do you want to dive into the plot of this thing? Because
I think we should. We talked 45 minutes on like the gameplay mechanics and controls and all that stuff. But there's a lot to be unpacked there. And then now we kind of get into the story here, and that's kind of the interesting one, because it starts off with a cool cutscene opening up where Claire and Moira, they're working for this company called Terra Save, because they need to put a new spin on terrorists. So we're going to put that as Terra Save. We're out there saving the world and so on like that, helping out all these bio-terror disasters caused by Wesker and the Spencer family and all this stuff that we're still cleaning up after all these years.
Yep.
Just when you think you got rid of one place, there was another family member somewhere else.
It's such a dumb name, dude. Like, I mean, I like what they do, like in the world and all that. Like, I appreciate it. Cool. Like whatever. Yeah, go fight the terrorists and whatever. But like, Terra Save. I mean, come on. Like you couldn't think of anything better than that. No. So, yeah, it made me laugh the first time I saw the logo, and all the dudes running, like through the like village and whatnot. It's like, Jesus Christ.
Because they got like that PSA video that plays or whatever somewhere. Yeah,
it's like the marketing campaign for Join Terra Save.
Terra Save today. Yeah,
it's so funny. But yeah, no. So she's at this like meeting area for Terra Save, like some convention dinner, fancy thing or whatever, and then just fucking out of nowhere, here comes the terrorists, they're just busting through the window, and and then you see Claire get basically like wrapped up by this dude, and this thing goes into her neck, and like injection, and then blackout. Then we wake up in this really weird like, I'm not even sure like what this really is. It feels like an old like Russian prison or something like that.
Yeah, like some gulag.
It's very I don't know. You just like you wake up in a prison cell essentially, and then you exit out of the prison cell, and you're like in this just dark, damp, very concrete. Everything's just dirty and wet, and whatnot. Very dimly lit. But I think that it sets like a very cool tone right off the get go, because again, the first game had its moments of horror. This game, I wouldn't say is like horror filled throughout the whole thing either, but it leans so much more heavily into this. There's some genuine like heart pumping moments where I'm like, like even in this first section, of just like walking through, this like really just like odd and I don't know, foreign place, like, and the way that they represent Claire within this whole section, like right off the get-go, she's confused, she has no idea what's going on, and that's replicated by the player, and I think that it was so tastefully done. I really, really, really love this, this intro part. So
Yeah, no, I think that first level really does sell it pretty well. It gets us good horror vibes going on. You don't know what's going on. You have these weird little bracelets, and they're trying to figure out what the heck this does. Of course, Moira, it's like her probably second week on the job, and next thing you know, she's just been kidnapped and thrown on some weird island, and of course, Claire grabs a gun the second that she sees it, and she's ready to fight. And for some reason, Moira's like, no, I don't do guns. It's like. So, when you first see it, you kind of almost want to go like, you kidding me? I don't care what logic you have. At this point, it doesn't make a difference. Grab the gun. She's like, no, I'll grab the crowbar instead. And you're kind of oh, okay, whatever. And I will say the thing about Moira is she's one of those characters that I feel like on paper, if someone tried to explain it to her, you would be like, oh, this character's going to ruin the whole game for us, isn't she? Because a lot of the stuff she has is almost like the stuff that if I saw it in a movie, it's one of my the biggest things I dislike. Is I always hate if I see a movie and there's shitty kids that have no respect for their parents, and their parents are doing everything and they possibly can for them. It's not like the parents are shitty. It's just a perfect example is I always use is that Steven Spielberg movie of War of the Worlds, the remake, how shitty those kids are to Tom Cruise. He's not doing anything wrong in it and so on like that. Stupid shitty Goku, in the American version. And then the little Dakota Fanning. It's they almost ruined the movie because the movie itself is actually not bad, but those kids are terrible. And I feel like Moira could fit in there, but her personality actually outweighs that because she is kind of fun. She's witty. She's got some good lines throughout it that I actually really do like. And even though she's kind of acting like a pissy teenager, some of the stuff in there, you go along more with it. It's not like you sit there arms crossed okay, how are you going to, I'm never going to be on your side no matter what. I mean, no matter what, I'm always going to be on Barry's side. But still, what I mean? You see it. And her character does work its way through as time goes on.
Yes. I very, very much agree. She is designed in a way for her character itself that's there's some of that teen angst and a little bit of badassery and blah 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 and the flaunting of don't careism and things like that. She definitely has that, but it plays well into that character herself. My first reaction to the whole Claire getting the gun and being like, we need to find you something. She's like, well, I don't really do that, and I'll just take the crowbar. My first guttural reaction to that was oh God, we got another Ashley situation, from RE4. Where it's just, exactly, but that's really not the
help
case.
Me, Leon.
Help me, please. But no, it's really not the case. I think that she, at least in combat, she really doesn't do anything, for when you're playing as Claire. The only thing she will do occasionally is that she will aim her flashlight and blind folk for you, and that's cool, whatever. The character herself, I think it's fine the way that it's written. It's actually good the way that it's written because of the whole I hate my dad. She won't refer to Barry as dad. She refers to Barry as Barry. Things like that. And just such an asshole. Blah blah blah. And talk about
he's always out just saving the world and so on like that. Because that's always the thing that comes across. It's not it's oh, he's a drunk and he never comes home and what I mean, like that, and he beats my mom. It's no, it's he's literally out saving the world. I don't know what more you can want from him.
Right. Exactly.
In Resident Evil, Barry is literally the superhero. He's literally him, Jill, Claire, Chris, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I mean, so from here, like Spence says, we have these really weird random just bracelets on us or whatever that are that have colors, and just kind of out of nowhere, you just a voice starts talking through it called the Overseer, and and the Overseer is very creepy at this point because again, it's so mysterious of where am I, what is happening, yada yada. And to hear this voice that's just giving you all these cryptic ass messages about what's going on, it's what the fuck.
And
So
I
thought
want
it
to say
was
this real quick is that if you are playing the PlayStation version though, because they actually that was right when that microphone feature came out in it, so like it actually utilizes that, so it talks to the controller, which I think is cool.
Oh,
For
that's
whenever it
cool.
does the wrist bracelet stuff, I'm like,
Yeah, right.
I love that little novelty stuff that Sony's always bad about keeping that around for later, series stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like whenever you have it, it's like, oh, that's a cool feature, that's neat,
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, so we play as Claire and Moira as we're like exploring this like semi kind of decrepit prison type thing or whatever. This is also kind of one of the problems that I had with the way that it was designed in terms of its episodes versus acts and whatnot. I don't recall exactly how this episode ends with Claire, because I think the interesting feature of the game is that when you do switch over to Barry, the timeline shifts to 6 months later. So you're basically like, I don't know. Do you remember what happens at the end of this act with Claire?
So what happens with the end of Claire is you fight your way out of that prison, so on, and you get to the radio tower. Is what
Radio tower. That's right. Yep.
Because that's the big thing is you get the radio tower. You're putting out the SOS and so on like that, and then it's supposed to, because they don't tell you right off the bat that Barry's 6 months behind. Because I think when the Barry chapter starts, it almost feels like, oh, he just heard the SOS and he just happens to be out on a ship and so on like that. I think you learn it like Barry finally gets to the radio tower and gets inside there. And then he goes, oh, and he meets Natalia.
Natalia.
And then when they get to there, she does that thing like, oh, like, like that was or he goes, the message was 6 months ago. And then I'm not sure if it's in the same chapter, but then Natalia goes, oh, Myra, like I knew her. She's dead. It's like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
by the next chapter.
Yep, that's how Act 1 ends. Yep, that's right. I forgot. Yeah, and Barry's lead up to meeting Natalia, I thought was super well done too. Because again, like in terms of character building, you see Barry as the dad. You see him as like the empathetic, like, oh shit, there's this little girl in this random ass island, or whatever. Like, I'm gonna save you, you see this. Again, like I'm going to refer to The Last of Us a lot in this because like it reminds me exactly of that. It's Joel and Ellie, like Barry thinking that Moira, he's trying to find her. She may be dead. She may be gone out of his life entirely or whatever. He finds this little girl, takes him under his wing. It's the Joel and Ellie story, way different, design and all that, but like the general like story itself is extremely similar. But I think it's very well done, because immediately playing as Barry, you gain this connection with this little girl, and then being able to play as the little girl too, and understanding that she has these like special powers and things like that, I thought was really well done. I still think that I probably enjoyed Claire's campaign more so than Barry's, and really. I think it's just her combat scenarios. I just enjoyed her combat scenarios a lot more. But again, I mean, like Barry's fine. Like again, I think the totality of his story and everything that's going on, what we're about to explain, is all good. I don't know. I think I enjoyed Claire's campaign more so than Barry's. More so for like combat than anything. But regardless, anyways, so. Yeah, so we end this episode with this little girl basically saying like, Moira, like she recognizes who she is, she's dead, and then like Spencer, and then it's just like cut to credits, and then then we join up in the next episode.
Yeah. I will say, like, the thing that's kind of interesting about Barry is because I like how Barry, he comes to this island loaded, though. Like, he has a machine gun, he's got his magnum, he's got the pistol, he's got all the kind of stuff. So he's got a little bit more gunpowder, like you'd expect. He came here prepared and so on. Where Claire kind of wakes up and is like, oh, there just happens to be a gun here, I'm taking it. See you later. You know what I mean? And, throughout time, Claire becomes just as loaded with guns as Barry does and so on like that. But, I think the other thing, too, even though I love the Barry parts just because it's Barry, but he does a little bit of retracing of kind of Claire's steps, I guess. She's like, well, I just kind of played this a second ago, this little section. Yeah. Granted, though, I will give it kind of credit, though, is even if it does a little bit of retracing, it's still, each one's, they go through their own, like, levels, no matter what. Yeah. It's never just like, play the same level with Barry, just slightly different enemy setup or something like that. No, they actually still break them up pretty well.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah. And then Act 2, again, I'm getting a little lost in the sauce here. I'm trying to remember where do we go into Act 2? So we end on the tower, and then from the tower, I can't remember what happens past that.
I know. Sometimes that's the only thing is like I will say because the chapters the way they kind of go in this one. Sometimes they kind of like they blend a little bit. Oh no, actually, okay. So the second one's when you run into the other Terra Save dudes, and they're like hanging out in that little town and whatnot part.
Okay.
And you meet up with those guys. They go, "Oh, there's a helicopter over here. All we need to do is get the battery and a couple other things." And of course, Claire, you go out and do it. Here's these strapping young lads. Claire, how about you? You go out and get it. And of course, there's one dude who's got a drill, which you're like, this is never going to end well. So of course he's drilling through walls. He's like, I got a drill. Look at me. Know, and of course, this dude eventually, you knew it was going to happen, but he gets infected and then he mutates and becomes kind of like one with this drill thing. So instead of getting like a chainsaw guy or something like that, like you'd got in the past, now you got this dude with a drill running around, which is actually kind of a cool and scary little boss that they got going on here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the section, because it's in that little room, right, where he busts through the wall or whatever. Yeah.
No, when he busts through the wall, that's with Barry, actually.
Oh, is that Barry? Okay.
Because this dude comes back and you finally get to kill him. But this is the part where you run around the little town with Claire, and I don't think you can kill him here. You just have to kind of get out of the way, and then eventually the other guy drops the ladder down and so on like that.
Right.
You climb up, you try to escape out of there. I almost want to say these are the guys that slightly explain, or at least you get kind of more of an idea that the bracelets and the way that the virus kind of works is called the T-phobos. So it works on fear. So if you get like really scared, that's how you start to mutate.
Yeah. Yeah, and what a weird concept for a virus strain, I just like I don't quite understand like what that's really about. Like, why fear? Out of most things, because I mean it's literally going to turn. I mean, like if you want to guarantee that you're going to change the world, like I mean, yeah, everybody's going to be scared of this shit, So
it's definitely going to work. But it would be kind of. I just want to say this because they have the fear thing. It'd be an interesting thing is there is a game on the N64. It was a Tetris game, and I think probably one of those things you could only get in Japan if I had to guess. But they had a heart rate monitor that went with it, and the faster your heart rate went, the faster that the blocks started dropping.
Really?
So I was thinking, like, picture this game running with a heart rate monitor. You have to wear like a heart rate monitor or something like that. And the thing is if your heart rate starts to go up because you get more scared, your character actually gets more and more infected as time goes on.
Yep.
That'd be kind of a fun like novelty thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually would be super interesting. Yeah. Huh. All right.
Most people probably just rip their watch off though, or whatever the heck it was, and just be like, "Yep, I'm fine now."
Yep, done with that. Yeah, that'd be. I wonder, like, because this whole Neuralink thing, like in real life, like this whole Neuralink thing's like slowly becoming a thing. I'd be really curious to see like what. If they're gonna like mesh video games into this, inevitably they will, somehow, some way where you're like direct download into the game or whatever, like. Yep. And if you could actually have stuff like that, where it is, like have a fear-based system or like like a panic-based system or something, I don't know. I'm just theory crafting out there, but it would be interesting. But yeah, so episode 2 in general, like I don't really remember a whole lot about it. Where I get super excited about this game is episode 3. So if you want to explain more about episode 2.
Well, I want to say that's generally the majority of it, because you meet up with those guys and so on like that. You see the little town and everything there, and then you kind of escape out of there. Wherever the heck, I can't remember where they end up exactly at towards the end. You start seeing those kind of like regenerator blob monster guys start to appear too. Mm-hmm. Which they kind of. They're kind of almost like the creatures in Resident Evil Revelations 1 / even the dudes at the very end of Resident Evil 4. They got these big old blobs on like their arms and so on like that, and you got to kind of shoot them, and then eventually this big old orange kind of eye looking thing will pop out of either their shoulder or their foot or their head, and then you shoot them there and then they're dead. So it's kind of a little fun mechanic and so on like that.
It's funny that you brought that up. So that is one other thing that I did with this game too, is that upon my third entrance into it, I was like, fucking, I'm just going to play on casual and just play through it and just more or less get the story based off of it. playing on casual, combat is stupid easy. So majority of those fights like didn't really have the full impact on me. Like later fights, yes, absolutely. Like I was sprinting around like a madman trying to collect ammo and, you know, save myself. These earlier fights, though, especially when you start to run into those character types that you're talking about, where basically, bro, like I would have my semi-upgraded pistol, shoot them twice in the leg, that orange thing would pop out, shoot it 2 more times, they're dead. Like, yep. Like that's simple, you know. And it became a science at that point, and made combat like super formulaic, you know, where it's just like, but again, it does get better. It gets way better, and I think that's as simple as just kicking the difficulty up another notch, you know, to correct that earlier on. So.
Mm-hmm. You know. Yeah, well, it's even like, because, you know, then you go to like Barry's mode or whatnot. When you see them there, you get like the Metal Gear Solid Barry stuff, where you go up, you get the cool stealth attacks from behind to those guys, which is very, very, very satisfying. I like that part a lot, and so on. Or Barry just kicks him out from like, you know, behind the legs, stabs him in that like heart thing, and so on. Yep.
Yeah, there's it's funny you actually mentioned stealth, because like stealth isn't used very often in this game, but like the few sections that are designed for it are very good. The if you try to use it in just like typical play, where you're just like kind of sneaking around or whatever, you know, and you try to get the jump on, you know, an enemy type or whatever, it works well enough, but the game definitely wants you to shoot, you know, in most combat scenarios. So.
Yeah, well, it's one of those ones. There's a lot of elements going on in this game, like all at the same time. So it's like some of them are kind of they're there and they're kind of underused sometimes too. Yeah, because sometimes you do stealth, and then the enemy just literally just turns around like he already knew you were there. You're like, great, now I'm just in a very bad position.
Right.
I'm right behind him, about as close as can be.
Yep.
And thank you. I thought I was gonna get the R2 drop on him, you know, because I can't remember, because can Claire do like the same like stealth Metal Gear attack that Barry can do?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Maybe she can. I almost don't know if I ever did it in like at least that last playthrough.
Yeah.
But, I did it all the time with Barry. That's how I just remember it so well. But I think also in this chapter too, we kind of once again we have Barry, and he's kind of in a similar area here. And I can't remember if this is when you do fight the dude with the drill finally towards the end. It could be. I actually felt like it was the next chapter, but he does learn some more about Natalia's parents, and this is like the one little thing that ties it into Revelations 1, is that apparently her parents were on Terra Grigia when that thing got eradicated from like the, you know, Hammer of Dawn.
That fucking Hammer of
Dawn. so her parents just got Hammer of Dawn, you know, and somehow, some way, you know, Wesker's sister decided to take this child and be like, you know what, got no family anymore, perfect capsule. You know, and so we learn a little bit there, but that's about the only real thing that ties these two games together.
Yeah, and it sucks, you know, like, I mean, again, like, I think going back to the earlier conversation about, like, you know, they already had the setup for this. They had a really cool story going on in the first game that I think ended in such a way to where me, as a brand new player to that game, going at the end, Spence, what the fuck happens next? You know, like, oh, it doesn't. You know, it's like, damn. Like, why not? You know, like, why not go back?
What was Jessica doing with that virus? You know,
right. You know, like, where's episode 5 through whatever? You know, like, that could have expanded onto this, or just Rev 3. You know, for that matter. Yeah, I don't know why they didn't like really do that. They're trying to tell, you know, stories within the universe, which I appreciate to an extent. But again, there's no sense of like conformity with any of this. And the number one thing, again, like, I think what this whole game centers back around to is like, I just know a lot more about Claire and Barry at this point, because the story that happens here is it doesn't seem very consequential to everything going on in Resident Evil universe in general, you know? Like,
yeah, so. This one's definitely a side story, where I feel like Revelations actually has a lot of merit towards like the rest of the Resident Evil stuff. You know, where this one's just kind of like, hey, what was Barry and, you know, Claire doing? Like, oh, this is what was going on. You know, and that's about all it is. Why weren't they in Resident Evil 6? Oh, well, this kind of explains it.
Right.
kind of.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't know where, like, for our viewer or our listeners anyways, like, this might get a little like confusing, because I don't remember exactly where we find out about Alex Wesker. I assume it's probably coming up maybe in Act 3 or something like that.
Well, I actually think it might be in that same part where she talks about her parents and Terra Grigia. I think that all kind of comes in a similar scene, because then they do that thing where he's like, Wesker and stuff. And there's like a picture. He's like, who's this? And she's like, that's Wesker. It's like, that's a woman, damn it. Like,
right.
You know, like, no, that is Wesker. It's like, oh, Wesker has a sister. And then you sort of, I don't know if you learned this right here or there, but you learned that, like, oh, when Spencer was doing like the Wesker like kids project or whatnot, you know, there was more of them than just Albert Wesker, you know. So you have what's it, Alex Wesker? Yeah, Alex Wesker.
Yeah, Alex Wesker is the sister.
The mysterious sister you've never heard about till now.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask, because I don't know RE all that well in terms of its total story. So like, this is the first time we've ever heard about Alex then.
Mm-hmm.
So, to my points via text during the time period of me figuring this stuff out, you know, Alex felt extremely shoehorned in for the sake that, you know, because Wesker is the big bad guy of majority of the series leading up to 5, you know. She felt really fucking shoehorned in for like just the name, you know, more or less. It's just like, oh, by the way, you know, Wesker has a sister. She's batshit crazy too. You know, she wants to live forever, and she has this little vessel with this little girl that she's gonna like download her consciousness into or whatever. Like I don't know. It's just like it just felt weird, you know. It works. It totally works. You know, like I was fine with it by the end, but yeah, it just kind of took me by surprise of like, why, you know, like, and especially now knowing that she hasn't been introduced, talked about, you know, like in a note in RE2 somewhere, you know, or whatever, you know, like no, it's just wild to me, you know. So but I do think in general she is a cool character, you know. I think they built her very well. She's the very typical like take over the world plot, you know, style, you know, like type character or whatever, but that has a lot of interesting quirks to her too. So
yeah, no, I do kind of agree. I think it's kind of a weird like ploy just to throw the Wesker name in there just for, you know, just because, just for, I guess, that little bit of like, you know, almost like fanfare, shock value at the same time. But at the same time, it's like, it's not enough to be like too like throw you off. It's like, well, it's like, oh, okay, I'll go along with it. I'm fine. You know, it's probably adding more than you probably need, but it literally could be just anybody, like a brand new character or something like that. I don't think it makes really much of a difference, you know, but at the same time, okay, whatever, here it is. Because it's, one of those things.
Yeah, like I said, it doesn't degrade the game at all. It was just like a thought of mine, like seeing that for the first time was just like, oh, Wesker, I mean, you know, like Albert has a sister, like, you know, just thinking that I was dumb and just being like a dumb, you know, like non-experienced Resident Evil player, or at least like knowing the lore and stories and everything, you know, like I just assumed that she was just a well-known character, you know, just like, you know, but by the end of this game, and we'll get to it when we get to that point, but yeah, like her whole transformation and all that type of shit, you know, is just like, what the fuck is happening, you know? So, but where we are at now in the story is easily my favorite part of the game, bro. When we go to, so playing as Claire and Barry both, we go to this like factory. In the factory, it's the ones. I mean, I'm looking at them right now. It's the one section of the game where I was just like, "Holy fuck, this is grotesque as hell." I'm taking screenshots, bro, and I took some screenshots of like some horrific shit in this game. But yeah, no, it's basically like a large slaughterhouse, you know, like factory based, you know, type thing or whatever. And I just thought it was so well done. It was so visually appealing to me. Just the you know, lakes of blood that are in there and whatnot, the commentary that's being talked about as you're walking around between Claire and Moira, and then inevitably Barry and Natalia and whatnot. This is easily my favorite part of the game. Like, it is so much fun.
Yeah, no, I think this part's really cool. Just like, yeah, the cool look to it. It's just got this kind of almost like Inferno looking, like depths of hell kind of vibe. And you start seeing some of these other interesting villains that you kind of get, because I think this is right where that dude with like the pot and like and he's firing out like the flaming rounds and so on like that.
Yep.
You know, and I remember, yeah, you know, just like that guy is there, and it's like that's an intense enemy when you first see him the first time. You're like,
Oh,
oh,
fuck yeah.
crap, blasting away at me and so on, running at you full steam, and just all the other cool things that you see in this area, and the color, you know, I mean, even though it's still in the red kind of vibe, like I feel like it brightens up a bit, but like that almost makes it kind of scarier and almost like Doom like. Yeah.
It kind of has like a like if you think of just like the movie Saw, like in general, like it totally has that type of horror vibe to it, and it totally got me. It was just like, all right, this is easily my favorite part of this game, you know, like and I was expecting to, like, you know, in Act 4, like I was hoping that it would get topped, but it's just like this sets such a high bar. If the whole game was like this and this type of tone or whatever, this would probably be a 10 out of 10 experience for me. This section alone, easy 10 out of 10. I think the rest of the game is probably like more like a 7-8, you know, but
yeah, no, this part's cool.
And, yeah, very, very cool. The brute that you're talking about, the it's like a mini boss basically or whatever that it tosses at you. Just this very large humanoid style, just super fat and just like, you know, like has like the butcher's robes on and stuff, just covered in blood, and like weird like helmet looking thing on his head and whatnot, holding this like large pot looking thing, you know, it's like big ceramic pot type thing or whatever, with just like a flame in his other hand, and just like he would just touch the pot and it would just like throw these like flame rounds at you across the map and or across the level and whatnot, and just the frantic running around, because this is where combat started to get interesting in this game.
Yeah. And that dude, he would get some super accuracy too. He could shoot that thing across the map and like smack you if you like weren't paying enough attention.
So in this section, this is where the combat really starts to ramp up. They start tossing multiples of enemies at you. So like with your standard zombie type, in any typical room in this portion of the game, it's like, you know, you deal with like 3 to 4 of them, plus a mini boss style, you know, enemy type, plus another thing, you know, like, and then it's just like this continual like rotation of just like combat to puzzle scenes, back to combat to exploration, back to combat, back, you know, and it's just like, and when I mentioned earlier like how this game is paced very well, this is the prime example of it. This act alone, in both Claire and Barry's scenarios, I thought was like paced very well. They're lengthy, they're very long. I think this is the longest section of the game, but they're paced well in terms of, again, combat to puzzles to exploration, and the intermixture of the three. Very, very tastefully done, very well done. I really, really enjoyed this section of the game.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of cool stuff here too. One thing I was thinking about too is there's that one kind of puzzle where you have to like drop the meat into like the grinder to get the blood to fill up and so on like that. And I can't remember, you get like a key or something out of it and whatnot. And so you gotta have one character operating the lever and so on like that, and then you have Claire on the other side shooting them down, and then all of a sudden, of course, Moira's opening the lever, and a bunch of zombies come out from behind her there and so on like that, you know, which makes for a cool scene. You know, which that's one of those where I feel like, especially in co-op, would make for, you know, kind of a really fun way to kind of go about it. You know, because it's almost scarier when it's not like a human player and you're like, oh shit, the computer's gonna die here, I just know it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the prime example too. Again, I think this whole act just nails everything, because between, like you just mentioned, that particular section where you have to split. Like one character needs to be in one room, the other one needs to be in the other room. One pulling a lever, the other one shooting the thing or whatever. And then, oh fuck, there's a combat scenario in the middle of it. Moira's only got her crowbar, you know, and she's on the other side of a wall from Claire that's going to take you a good 15 seconds to get to, you know, with your guns, you know, to go take them all out and whatnot. And just like the level of panic, you know, that happens at this point it's just so good. It was so well done. I really, really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that part's really cool, and just a lot of the stuff in here is just neat. And there's so many of the enemy types too. We haven't really mentioned a whole lot about that, but you got these standard zombie ones. You got those I was gonna say regulators, but I mean regenerators or whatever the heck those are. But then they got big fat blob guys, which remind me of like sort of similar to like the exploder ones and Last of Us / actually even Left 4 Dead, where you got
I was gonna say like Left 4 Dead, the bloaters.
You got the bloaters and stuff like that, and they have an interesting thing too in this too, where the normal zombies can actually turn into that too. Like they almost kind of have like a Crimson Head thing, where like you kill them, and then all of a sudden they'll like transform back up, and they'll be exploders and so on. Sometimes those guys get you, and the second those guys get you, you're kind of screwed, because then you can't see the screen's all covered in goo and so on like that. You know, they do kind of some massive damage even on like different difficulties and so on. But you got those. There's the cool dudes that are like, they got the steel mask on their face and so on like that. Almost kind of like a mini version of Pyramid Head, but like they just come slowly meandering out and so on like that, and just like you just have to kind of just start blasting them and so on. But there's a lot of cool varieties of enemy types. You know, that they're definitely. I feel like in this game, it's kind of going less from, as I feel like when you think of the original Resident Evil games, they have kind of a realistic vibe, if that makes any sense. Like I feel like all this stuff's kind of designed to be more like science-based type, like here's some bioweapons and like, you know, that kind of stuff. Where this game's almost kind of veering more towards a Silent Hill kind of like thing, where like they are more monsters than like, you know, weapons, I guess you would say.
Yeah, no, enemy design in this game is brilliant. I very much enjoyed this version compared to Rev 1. Rev 1 just like had it had some variety, but it wasn't nearly like this, you know.
They're all the water monsters.
Yeah. And some of the so some of like what is happening in this is like the zombies they're not like really I mean they're infected, but they're not like really zombies. They're just like insanely brainwashed and tortured people, you know. And the you hear it in their voices when you're like, when they first encounter you or they see you or whatever, and they just have these like horrific, just guttural fucking screams, and they like, you know, sprint at you and like arms out, and like it's literally panic inducing, you know. Like there's multiple sections of this game. You're walking down a hallway or whatever, and yeah, it tosses at you the cheap jump scare, you know, like the dude jumps out from a doorway in front of you or whatever, you know. But like the jump scares are so few and far between that they actually feel good when they do happen. And the typical combat themselves, the animation, the movement, the, you know, like the way that everything kind of culminates together with these character types, knowing that they're like mental patients, more or less, just rapidly insane, that are slightly infected, they're wanting to kill your ass. The way that they scream at you, the way they move, all this type of stuff, like it just totally plays into the horror side of this. Like it feels so much more like a horror game than Rev 1 ever did, you know. And I think it was so tastefully done. It was really good, really good.
Yeah. And just even a little backstory on I guess all these like zombie characters and so on is that you kind of read this out some of the files, but pretty much this was like some kind of Soviet mining facility, and you know, something like that. And then of course at some point, you know, Umbrella, well, more like Alex Wesker comes by and sort of comes in, she takes over, becomes the foreman and everything like that. I'm like, oh yeah, this would be great, you know, we're gonna get union wages all of a sudden and so on like that. And of course as time goes on, it's like, wait a second, this is not working out so well. Like, so certain people are disappearing and so on like that. Some people are being overworked, they're transforming into stuff, and you kind of see this like changeover that no, she's just kind of using this like mining site as like an experiment, because they're I can't remember if we actually mentioned this, but they're trapped on an island. That's like the whole thing of like where they are. So they're this weird mining prison island thing, you know. And then throughout the whole time is like you'll see this like in the loading screens, but they mentioned that, what was that author's name that from like the 1800s, Franz.
I don't know.
But they like you'll see like a quote from him in the load. You might not see it in like the PC version. Probably loads up fast. The PS4 one, because PS4 was, I hate to sort of say that was one of the worst systems for loads times. I feel like it's like worse than a Neo Geo CD. You know, but like there's some games that they're so bad they take like 45 seconds to load between stuff. But well, whatever, they have that dude, which I guess, you know, you could say they have Dante's Inferno in the first one, and sort of a weird like book tie-in thing, and then in this one they got I was going to pull it up in 2 seconds here, but of course I can't seem to find what the heck it was. But, Franz Kafka, you know, you'll see like little quotes pop up there. And apparently like his stories were all kind of like in a similar vein to how these kind of go. And they use titles and stuff that are like that. But, so you kind of have that as your kind of overlay story and so on. And after we sort of get out of that like chapter 3 area, which ends on that stupid puzzle that doesn't actually get you anything except for like an extra gun, where you have to take like the gravestones or whatever and find that.
Yep.
Because that was one that was like easy, easy, easy. And then with that last one, I'm like, okay, cool. It's like what, like one behind and to the left or whatever the heck it was. I'm like, cool. I'm like, okay, it's not any of these. And then each time you like check it, you have to literally go back and redo them all over again.
Right.
So 1, 2, 3, no. 1, 2, 3, no. You know, and I just did that thing where I left Claire over there because I needed Moira for the flashlight. But boy, that took me like a moment. And it was like, oh no, it's the one technically in front, not behind, even though that's what the note said was behind. Yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I can't say I struggled with any one puzzle really. That one in particular, I think, was more challenging than pretty much any of the other ones. But I don't know. I didn't really struggle with any of that. More so, what I was struggling with around this point in the game was just dying in general, like which we will get to. But one hit kill enemies. Stop it, Capcom, please. Especially with checkpoints as bad as this game has. Please stop. You know, like,
well, yeah, and that's always been kind of like that's been my biggest kind of pet peeve, I guess, to survival horror games. I know some people love this part of it, so it's like it's a weird thing, but like I've always hated the one hit kill stuff, and like, you know, that's why there's certain games which I can't really like. It's like, here's an example of a game that it looks like something I should really enjoy, but because of the way it's stylized, I just never have cared to do it. Is that Alien Isolation game, where you guys slowly sneak around and hide, and but the alien gets you. That's it. Goes to a cutscene. You're dead.
Yep.
Like, and I don't find that necessarily scary. I don't find that terrifying. I just find that like that makes me just want to play another game. Like, you know, there's better alien games out there. You know, I'll go play Colonial Marines. I don't care.
Right. Yep. There you go.
You know, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I that the new Metroid game was doing that, Metroid Dread, and it was just like I was almost like it just kind of killed it for me, and I felt bad. It was the only Metroid game I've never played through. And the one hit kill stuff, I don't know. And some people love that stuff. So it's a weird, you know, it's the same thing like in stealth games. I kind of hate that, like where it's like the old, like the original Sam Fisher games where you'd be seen by one dude. And it's like, burp! Restart the entire level. Forget it. Like, you know, you did great until then. It's like, I always feel the thing is give me a fighting chance. That's all I ask for. Give me a fighting chance. It's like, if I don't really have that fighting chance, it kind of loses it for me. And as I said, I know some people actually like that gameplay style, you know, and I know that that makes up like a third of like survival horror games if you really think about it. There's a lot of survival horror games out there that have either like the monster that you can't kill, the one hit kills, all that kind of stuff. And weirdly enough, it's like as much as I love survival horror games, that's like the one thing I don't like a whole lot. Yeah. And this one it has a couple of those. There's like those plant monsters. I guess is the best way to sort of say it. I don't know what they are. They got like the orb in the center, and they got the blobby arms and everything like that. And as long as you stay like a mile away from them, you're fine. But the second you get too close, they could shoot out like their little arm thing and suck you in.
Yep. And those are the exact enemies that I'm going to reference when we get to the bonus episodes of this game, because Jesus Christ, they pissed me off so bad. But there's ways to do it. I don't mind one hit kill mechanics if it's telegraphed well enough. This game, with that monster in particular, does not telegraph that attack well enough. Now that I know what to look for, you know, because it does do a slight animation where you see the thing kind of curl up towards itself before it jets out at you. But it is so fast and it's so punishing to the player, you know, on first encounter that it's like, you really wouldn't know that. I guess the other visual design thing that the player should recognize, but it's not telegraphed well. And again, I'm going to keep referring to telegraphing of animation and whatnot, is that the tendrils on the particular arm that can grab you has red on it, you know, so there's a visual cue there that like, don't let this thing touch you, you know. Mm-hmm. But the first time I got grabbed by it, I was anticipating to get grabbed and be badly damaged, you know, like down to red bar health, you know, like I have one hit left, you know, or whatever. But no, it just straight up kills you. You know, this thing, like, it picks you up and it slams you on the ground 6 times, you know, and then it drops you, and then it just kind of shuffles off and you are dead screen. And it's just like, God damn it, dude. You know, like, I don't enjoy that. a quick reference for games that do this well, where I don't mind the one hit kill mechanics, is games like any of the Souls games, Elden Ring, and whatnot. Those games at least feel fair because one, you have a lot more control over your character in terms of his health bar and stamina bar and gear, and it's a completely different type of game than this is. But again, the core principle stands that enemies are extremely well telegraphed in those games, in most scenarios, I should say. Mm-hmm. So, but so we get through this whole factory section. We go through the butcher shop. We deal with some new enemy types and whatnot. I think that this whole area was very, very well done, as I continually mentioned. Is this the section where the stealth part comes into play, or is this in chapter 4? Where it gives you 15 minutes and you got to go through the village and collect all your ammos and whatnot. And there's just a shitload of those regenerator type enemies.
Well, that's in the DLC, that part.
Okay, that is DLC. Okay.
Yeah,
see, again, mismatching of.
Yeah, that's the more. Well, that's the thing, because you go through some of these areas that they feel like they kind of mix together, and so on like that. But no. I want to say this real quickly. Okay, other than that plant monster that kills you in one hit, is there another enemy that can kill you in one hit in this game? I didn't think so. It's just that one, there. And I just learned to stay as far away as from that. That was my tactic. As long as I knew I was pretty far away from it, I was good. The downfall is once you start running out of ammo on that kind of enemy, and you're like,
yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
because that one takes maybe the fat dude with the pot thing that we were talking about earlier, but even then I think that this enemy type is still tanks the most amount of damage. It would take multiple clips of a machine gun. It would take a handful of shots with the revolver, this when I talk about formulaic style gameplay, like I was talking about earlier with the types where you shoot the limbs a handful of times and then the orange thing pops up, you shoot that twice and you're done, that type of formulaic, so that doesn't work with this enemy type. I never got consistent enough to be able to kill it consistently and feel good about it. Every time I did kill it, it just kind of felt like random chance, just plummeting as many rounds into that orange blob in the center of it as I could. This is easily my least favorite enemy type in the game. I think you could cut this enemy type and not degrade from the game whatsoever.
Yeah, just one thing I learned too is that if you could hit it with a Molotov cocktail or something like that, kind of right off the bat, that kind of would break it down pretty quickly. But especially when getting that DLC when you have two of them at the same time. God. That's where that kind of came in handy. But yeah, other than that enemy, I think that's kind of about it. And you do fight him on. Well, this was the other part. I remember I overthought myself on one of these. I think it was leading to it. There's a part where you have to climb up on top of these cranes and whatnot like this, as Barry and Natalia. And I was doing the thing where I saw the ladder up there and something like that. I'm like, oh, I gotta shoot this down or something like that. And I was like, why is it not coming down or anything like that? I'm like, oh, maybe I have to boost up Natalia. I'm like, well, that's not working or anything like that. I'm like. And then all of a sudden the characters were doing the thing if you try to talk to each other, it'd be like, hey, come over here. And they'd be like, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not. Yeah. I'm like, oh, great. Did I get it glitched out or something like that? Yeah. And I kind of went back, forth, overthinking, and then go oh, no, there's a spot over on the other side where Natalia can just climb on up. And or no, I think what it was is if you hit the elevator switch twice, it goes across. I'm like, well, how the hell was I supposed to figure that out right off the bat? You know what I mean?
Right. That was a cool puzzle. I actually really enjoyed that puzzle. So it's basically like a crane and gantry system, and there's a bridge that goes across, and this thing is on a powered rail system, and it just moves left and right. There's a little cage down at the level where you can pull the levers or whatever. It's on the same level as that goes back and forth, across this bridge, and it's super simple. I mean, there's nothing really challenging to it. You're not in combat during this section or anything like that. But the way that you intermix between Barry and Natalia to have her pull the switch to move the bridge over, so he can climb up, he can come across, he can go down, he can pull the switch, it goes back, she can jump on the little platform thing, you send her across, and it's this whole mishmash until you get to the end of this bridge. Super simple in design and whatnot, but again, enjoyable. It was an enjoyable puzzle for me. It was a bit thought provoking, but it wasn't so goddamn hard that I'm sitting there on Wikipedia, or like like one of the wiki sites, like trying to figure out how to do this stupid puzzle. I don't think anything in this game outside of the one that you mentioned that actually caused me to look at a strategy guide.
Yeah, no, because this one I was just overthinking this one. I was doing that thing where I was like, well, there's got to be a way there. Oh man, did I glitch this thing out? Do I have to run back down the ladder and come back up? And then I was like, I even reloaded my file because I thought I glitched it. I was like, no. It was like, oh, you just flipped the switch twice. That's all you had to do.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I just was like, it just didn't cross my mind. I'm like, I played through this game twice before, and for some reason I totally spaced out on that. But yeah, other than that though, that was about the only part that I got kind of really turned around at. Other than that, in the graveyard scene, But yeah, that pretty much leads us, I think, to chapter 4, where we kind of get towards the end. I mean, I guess chapter 3 on Claire's one, is that the one that ends where they fight the one dude that's like the FBC guy and
Neil? Yeah, I think that ends with Neil. Mm-hmm.
And then you have that battle, and I think that's the one where you have a choice that we didn't realize. You had an idea about it, but I wasn't too sure if that was the case. I thought it just always played out this way, where you could either have Claire kind of try to fight off Neil towards this end cinematic, or you switch to Moira, and then she actually can pick up a gun finally, and use it. And then you kind of realize why Moira doesn't pick up a gun, because she accidentally like shot her sister or something like that when she was younger. I don't think she killed her, but she never used a gun past that point. Obviously, there wasn't good gun safety laws going on in Barry's household.
Oh yeah. Yep. And that's again, like when we start to recognize this portion of Moira, this is where she really like flourishes into an actual character, because like the whole mystery of like, why doesn't she like guns? Why did like we knew that something happened up till this point, but we didn't know what. To find this out, like, oh shit, was it the sister? Or was it the wife of Barry? Was it her mother that she shot?
For some reason, I thought she shot her sister. I could be wrong.
Okay, because it's a family member for sure.
Yeah, she shoots a family because Barry has two daughters. Because I think I remember that from like in Resident Evil 1 when he shows the picture to like Wesker or whatever. But yeah, so she accidentally shoot. And this is almost like the breaking point of the family, is that it's weird. She makes the mistake, but for some reason, Barry's the one who gets blamed for this for the rest of the life, because it's like one of the ones she shoots the sister. The sister doesn't die, though. I think I will say this: if you want a stronger story, I think it would have actually been the sister did die. Oh, yeah. And then Barry's almost like it's like it really estranged the relationship. He doesn't really trust his daughter as much anymore because she's like killed his other daughter in a sense, so on like that. But she survived, so it doesn't seem like it's really the end of the world or anything like that. But Moira makes it out like it is. Her and Barry kind of lose their relationship from there, and they start to drift apart. Barry starts getting more into the work. Moira starts, just being the rebel teenager and so on like that. But somehow, some way, gets a job in the same field that Barry does.
Yeah, of course. How coincidental.
Working with somebody who literally works with Barry. Barry works with Chris. Chris's sister Claire. Couldn't get any closer to Barry.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you kind of learn that kind of stuff there, and so she finally picks up the gun to save Claire. Knowing that this is the time and whatnot like that. And but apparently, if you don't, because I thought you always just got it just almost like automatically switched over to have Moira shoot at Alex, or not Alex, fucking Neil. And but apparently, if you don't do it that way, it changes the ending of the game like way down the line, which is kind of cool. So we just watched that little cutscene there. It's like, oh, that's different, where it makes Natalia turn evil towards the end.
Right. So like the scenario that's happening here, you're fighting with Neil. Neil is a character that helped us on earlier. I think he was the one that kicked down the ladder in Act 2 or whatever for us.
Yeah, I think he was, because out of the three dudes at the beginning,
right,
early on.
So he's like the quote unquote like hidden love interest of Claire. She won't admit it. Is kind of what the game alludes to or whatever. But anyway, so like Neil gets all freaked out. He gets scared. Oh shit, he's infected. He changes. Blah blah blah. We have this boss fight. We kill him. The cutscene that happens is that like Neil falls on top of Claire, and at this point the game throws a QuickTime event at you, and it's like jam on this button, like jam on X or whatever, And so I start to do that, and Claire's like, like flopping around, and whatnot, like, and there's a gun sitting there, and the camera angle is kind of like behind Moira. You see the back of Moira, you see the gun on the ground, and then you see Claire like in the foreground or whatever. And you're jamming on this button, and like Claire's like reaching for the gun, but she as much as I was jamming on it, she wasn't grabbing it. But I also noticed the option to, because it physically shows up on screen to say switch characters, or whatever. So I just assumed that was what the game wants you to do, is just switch characters, because immediately as soon as I switched to Moira and I start jamming on that same button, like she's reaching and reaching and reaching, and then she finally grabs the gun, pulls it out, shoots Neil in the head 3 or 4 times, he dies, falls on top of Claire rolls him off, end of scene, whatever. The interesting part is that I got a achievement for that, and it says, let me pull it real quick. Where is it? So the achievement's called "Here's My Resignation," and the words behind it is Moira defeats Neil in Claire's episode 3. So immediately upon doing this, I text Spence and I was just like, "Is there a choice there?" Because like I didn't recognize it, and you at that time were just like, "No, I don't think so." Like whatever. Find out today that Spence sends me a video for a completely alternate ending to where, yeah, no shit, if you don't allow Moira to pick up that gun, she doesn't. We'll get to here in a little bit, but she does a certain thing at the tail end of this episode. That doesn't happen, and next thing you know is like you get quote unquote the bad ending. So if Claire picks up the gun, I really want to do it now. Like I want to go back and like play through that section and have Claire do it and really see that scene for myself and see like what the actual differences are, because you sent me the cutscene that happens. I'm curious if there's anything that happens gameplay wise leading up to that.
Yeah, because that's what I thought too. I'm like, there's got to be a little bit more to it than that, because it seems like kind of a big deal, and that's just weird. It's just like in all the times I played this game, it's like I never even crossed my mind that there was that there. I think it's just because it just tells you press triangle. Okay, press triangle. It's like, I think if it didn't give you any of those button cues, you wouldn't think anything of it. You would just be like, okay, whatever player you were as, you would just be kind of stuck doing that.
Yep. So at this point in Claire's portion of this act, we are obviously still looking for the overseer type thing. We find the overseer, learn a hell of a lot more about Alex and what Spence was explaining about her role within this island, her taking over, basically the entirety of the island to create these, experiments and whatnot with this new, T Phobos, type virus and whatnot. I think it's at this section where she actually injects herself with either more or like a different strain or whatever, and then she starts to transform, and like turns into the crazy grotesque monster that we all love and know, like in most Resident Evil games, yeah,
this gets all mutated and so on. Well, because I want to say, because the 4th chapter for Claire is where pretty much you go to like the laboratory, like just like any Resident Evil, there's like the laboratory level and something like that.
Yeah, the piece that I remember most about that is the where you actually run into Alex, but there's like that barrier wall in between you and Alex or whatever, and she's like explaining herself, and then fucking Alex just like straight up just like kills herself like right there. She just puts a gun to her head and just blam, and just like blood splatters all over the barrier in front of you and whatnot, and you're like, what the fuck? What the hell is that all about? So, but this is where we start to find out about Alex's ambitions and like what she is really trying to do, the reason why they're all there, the reason why this little girl Natalia is such an important character in the totality of this plot, is that I can't quite tell, like is she like just like straight up like, is Alex trying to download her consciousness into this little girl to live forever? I mean, is that like the ultimate plot here?
Yeah, because kind of the vibe what it is Natalia, because for some reason of her parents dying in Terra Grigia, she's immune to like fear. I don't know exactly how that seems to translate, but because of that, so she's immune to fear, and then so she seems like she's the perfect candidate. I think also though that Moira and Claire are supposedly candidates as well for this experiment, and Natalia is the perfect choice though. That's the perfect one, and Natalia runs away, and so she's kind of seeking after her the whole time, trying to get her back in there. And whatnot, but that's what it is. Yeah, it's like if you put your consciousness, like maybe she's just, her body's already failing her and so on like that. But if she puts her consciousness in Natalia, which becomes the dark Natalia, she can kind of go on and Yeah.
Yep. So it's really at this point where Barry's plot really starts to kick up too, in terms of the whole like Joel and Ellie thing. Where he has this like just extreme love for this little girl that he just met, type thing, wants her to be safe, wants her to do well and whatnot, and like she has been taken and she's like in a chamber, being worked on by Alex and whatnot, and now it's like this whole like almost like a revenge plot, style, where he wants to kill Alex, like he wants to go in there, and to see like the whole experimentation side of this and all that. I think again, just like visually was really cool, to see little Natalia like sitting in like that little chamber of hers, like the little glass thing and whatnot, and she's like in this little pod, like they got all these things hooked up and whatnot, and then inevitably like leading up to Alex like transforming, turning into the super monster and whatnot, and then we have like this final boss battle with Barry. I thought that fight was actually really cool. I really enjoyed it. I liked the again, just like the design of the way that they transformed Alex. I thought was super cool. She's like very scaly in terms of like length and whatnot, which is like very just like bone mass, just like a ton of like spinal, like in rib cages and things like that. It's just very long and lanky and just creepy as shit looking. So.
Yeah, and then she's got kind of those Ouroboros, like kind of tentacle things all shooting out and so on, looking kind of like Princess Mononoke style.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And so there's all that going on. And and you're just kind of at that point where like you're just going to take her out. Barry's there to save the little girl, which once again, I will say, if this story kind of had that, say if Moira actually killed her sister and so on like that, I feel like almost if Barry was like, I maybe wasn't able to protect one daughter, but I can protect this surrogate daughter type thing. Mm-hmm. I think it would have added a little bit more levity to that part there, in a sense. But even still, like, he's going to still save her no matter what from this kind of disaster and whatnot. And here's where that shifting, story ending kind of goes. And you know what? Actually, I guess we forgot. There's also another major stuff in the Claire scene is when Claire and Moira are running away in their chapter, because this comes before the Barry part. They're escaping out of the laboratory, and of course, Alex has set the self-destruct system, so you got 5 minutes to get out of here, and so on. And as you're escaping and so on like that, towards the very end, you're running down these stairs, and you're almost there to like jump out at the end, and literally all these rocks come, or the ceiling comes crashing down on Moira, and she gets stuck underneath it there and stuff like that. And it's like, I remember like on my game, I had like 15 seconds at this point. So I was like, oh, like one of those moments too. And then, I remember what it was. She's like, Claire, go on. I'm like, well, shit, I don't want to reset. I know how long these checkpoints are. I'm going to jump out there. And then I kind of thought, after I jumped out, I'm like, I wonder if there was a way to save her. I couldn't remember. It's been too long. And so on like that. And I don't think that scene I don't think there is anything you can do. That's just how it kind of is, because they want you to feel like you kind of, like, as Claire, you're like, oh, I should have probably helped her. And instead, I just jumped out of the window. And
it's an intentional gut punch, because it, like Spence about to explain, like there's going to be the split in bad ending versus good ending here. And I don't know. I think it was well done in my own personal opinion. I thought it was actually pretty all right. Because it did feel like a gut punch when you have to leave Moira, especially after like the character development side of this and the totality of the game, because this is the end, basically. So yeah, I agree.
So that kind of goes there. Then we come back to the Barry boss battle and so on like that. And as you're kind of fighting Alex and so on like that, there comes a part where literally Moira comes up, because you think she's dead by this point. Of course, she's been mentioned multiple times, and even Barry's almost at that point. Moira comes out and sort of like saves the day for a second and allows like Barry to sort of escape out of there. And then as you're sort of trying to leave the island together and Alex is still pursuing you, of course, Claire shows up in a helicopter to make sure it's all right and so on like that. And then you kind of go back and forth between Barry running on the ground, shooting Alex and so on like that, to Claire up in the helicopter firing a machine gun, then shooting a rocket launcher and all that stuff.
Yep. And how
style.
Oh, 100%, dude. I mean, like what was it? Was it Rev 1 that you were I can't remember where are we fighting Wesker where he's catching rockets.
Oh, that's number 5.
Is that okay? That is Resident Evil 5, yeah. Because it reminded me exactly of that. Like that whole scene of like her in the slow motion rocket, and she's like, oh, you know, like it's coming in, and it like hits her in the face and explodes. Like I don't know. It was like it's that total. You can see where the Resident Evil 6 vibes come into play at this point because like it's just way over the top and just like, you know, ridiculous, but it's fun. You know, it's a fun scene.
I mean, no matter what, Resident Evil, like that literally goes back to the very first one because in the original one, when you fire the rocket, you know, at Tyrant when he's up there, it has
right,
and then sometimes it'll give you like the 3 shot where it'll be like 1, 2, 3, and then it's like, will it hit him? Will it blow up? Or does he do the thing where he smacks it out of the way like he does sometimes, you know? So it's been there since literally day one. But yeah, so that's kind of there. And then it kind of works out where, you know, Claire's kind of like, oh, Moira's okay and everything. Like she's like, that's okay. We all agree. It's fine. You know what I mean? Like you had to do what you had to do. I wanted you to go. Everything worked out. You know, one big happy family now. And it's like literally Barry's like, this little daughter's now mine too. Like
yeah. So there's a. Okay. I'm sorry. You can explain the bad ending, and then I'll
so apparently, like, so if you do and they call it a bad ending, I almost call it more an evil ending. I think that's the better way to just kind of describe it because it's not really a bad ending. It's an evil ending. So like instead, like what it is. So if if Moira doesn't pick up the gun and use it, so she doesn't like in a sense woman up and finally pull the trigger, you get this other one where Natalia finally converts on over. Like Alex finally is able to convert herself into Natalia, and she becomes bad Natalia, which you learn later on from, or evil Natalia. You learn from the DLC part, kind of explains that part more. But she literally in that boss fight turns into there and then kind of like taunts Barry and so on like that. Like there's nothing you can do. Like I am Alex now and so on like that. And then it just like cuts. You know what I mean? It just leaves you hanging and so on like that. So I kind of wonder if there is a little bit more or anything like that. But it's an interesting twist one, you know.
Yeah. Because even in the good ending, I mean, like Natalia does have like a slight, like you can tell that parts of Alex have leaked into her, just to like her little smirk at the end of the game and whatnot. You know, like it's heavily implied that Alex has pulled off what she wanted to, even in a slight sense. To this bad ending. And again, like I have zero context for any of this other than the cutscene on YouTube that you sent me. But does he her fully turn? Like, no, she is Alex. Like I honestly, arguably, I think it's a cooler ending, in my opinion. It sucks that Moira actually dies at this point, in that version of the ending. But, for Alex to actually pull off like the whole reason why this game even exists, like about the island and about the transformations and about the like the virus and this, that, and the other, and trying to gain immortality of like transferring her consciousness to another body, like for her to actually pull that off, I think is the cooler ending in my opinion, even though it is evil. So
yeah, because it's definitely the evil ending, and I guess in that one too, Moira doesn't make it in that version, so that means that Barry kind of almost isn't able to complete his goal. Claire doesn't show up, maybe. Like I guess that's like all the things that kind of lead to why it's the bad ending in a sense.
Yeah, and Barry looks crushed in that cutscene. I mean, like because Moira is dead. I did do a little bit of research after you sent me that video. So Moira is dead. I don't know Claire's status at this point, but the fact that the little girl changes into Alex more or less, it's just like that soul crushing like failure, like he completely failed this mission. So
yeah. No, I think that's just kind of interesting that that's there, and that it's almost like the harder ending to get, which is kind of because mostly the bad ending you get is because you didn't do everything right or something like that. This is the one where you almost have to kind of go out of your way to get this ending. I feel like I feel the average player does not see this ending at all.
No, I never would have guessed this would have been another ending. Outside of, like I said, like my one comment about like the Moira defeats Neil in Claire's episode 3, like why is that an achievement? That's such a weird thing to be an achievement if that's the way the game's supposed to be.
I guess when I saw that pop up, I just went like, oh, that's just the end of the chapter. I looked at it like it was the end of the chapter thing. I didn't even question it enough.
Right.
Yeah,
like I said, it's just the verbiage that's really what caught me there. So
yeah,
but yeah, and then I mean, I think in general, like Rev 2 in terms of its story, I think was totally fine. It was serviceable. I learned a hell of a lot more about Claire and Barry. I like the new characters. I don't know, man. This is a very solid title. You know, like I think it was very well crafted. I would like to touch on the bonus episodes real quick. I played one of two of them, being the struggle.
It is a struggle.
Oh my god, it is a struggle. So I ran it twice. First time through, died pretty quickly. So more or less like what this game mode is. I wouldn't even call it like an expansion into the game. It's just more like a game mode. Even though there's a little bit of story here. You're playing as Moira during the section of the 6 months it takes Barry to get to the island, more or less. You learn a lot more about. That's actually one character that we forgot to mention because he's so brief in the actual campaign. You run into this just like random old Russian dude that's just like, get off my property, and basically, it's just, what are you doing here?
He's like the Russian version of Fuzzy Lumpkins.
Yeah, 100%. Grumpy old man, basically. So he takes Moira in over that 6 month period. So technically, Claire escapes. Moira's crushed by the rocks, or the building, like with the crumbling rocks and stuff that come down. The Russian man saves her, brings her to his little hut or whatever, rehabilitates her, and then is just like, well, you're going to be here for a while, so we're going to learn how to hunt, and blah, 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 and like you're going to really learn how to use guns. So that's like the story premise, of what's going on. It's just the 6 months in between. The gameplay mechanics is really interesting because it has a like food system to it where you have to go around and you have to physically hunt, and there's bunnies and things you can kill and whatnot, and you're picking them up and you're gaining what they're referred to as rations in the game. And rations are basically like your almost like your lives, kind of.
Yeah, it's literally a live system. You get like 6 lives or five
right.
or 6 lives total.
And you need to play through the totality of this episode with those amount of lives. Now, granted, you can re-up because you can go hunting again and go get more rations and whatnot and re-up that. The part that fails me was the 15-minute section, the stealth section, what I was referencing earlier that I thought was in the campaign, but it's actually in this episode. So it throws you into this like village scene. It gives you 15 minutes and you need to go hunt to go restock up because you're more or less like more than halfway through the episode at this point. You've probably lost a couple rations. You probably don't have much in terms of ammo at this point and whatnot because of all the combat scenarios that happened prior. So you're going around, you're sneaking. The problem is that you have 15 minutes to do this, but the moment that any one enemy sees you, it reduces immediately down to 30 seconds, and you have to sprint to the end of the level and get out. I died in this section so many goddamn times, or like didn't die, but like just ran out of time, because I kept getting caught. So this is the one portion of the game where stealth to me did not work well, and I couldn't quite figure out why. Enemies where I would be right behind an enemy in one of my 2 times running through this wouldn't see me at all. Another time I would go roughly in the same rough position or whatever and it would see me, and it's like, god damn it, like why is this a thing? So I didn't really get much out of that particular section of the game. And this is really what screwed me. This is why I didn't go into the Little Miss episode and didn't never actually properly finish the struggle episode. So the section after this is like the big combat finality ending, portion of this episode. It tosses numerous. I mean, like I think in general, like in total, there's like 24 or 25 enemies in this particular area or whatever. And granted, it doesn't toss all of them at you at once, but it's like it's a trickle feed of just enemy after enemy after enemy. And if you're not keeping up with those enemies, they start to stack. They start to get more hectic. Like you're running around. Trying to maintain, yourself, your health, your ammo, blah, blah, blah. I literally killed everything, everything but one monster. And it's that stupid monster that we were talking about with the 1-hit kill mechanic, dude. And oh my God, I literally it's down to, I've knocked off all of its tentacles. It doesn't have the, it's slow moving at this point. It's badly damaged. But the telegraphing of this monster does not tell you how close to death it properly is. I'm running out of ammo. I'm down to my last few bits of bullets and whatnot. I'm firing on this thing where I can. I'm trying to be strategic. I know that if it grabs me, because of an earlier experience in the campaign, I know that if it grabs me, it's going to kill me. Trying to maintain distance. Bro, I go into the fucking warehouse. Inside the warehouse in this zone, you can climb on top of a box and then you can climb outside of a window and you're standing up on a scaffolding. And it's on the fucking ground floor below me, like a good floor below me. I'm firing on this fucking thing, bam, 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 and then the game glitches. It's stupid. It sucks its little tongue thing back, and then it lunges outwards, and it fucking grabs me. It just like it goes from like frame 1 on the ground to frame 2 up here, and it just fucking grabs me and kills me. And I was like, nope. And I turned the game off. I haven't launched it since. That's like, that pissed me off so bad, dude. I was so upset. And of course it was my last ration.
You know? Well, that kind of screws the thing, because then you have to start the whole thing, because that thing's kind of long too. I mean, it's not super long, but I mean, it at least takes probably about an hour plus. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hour and a half or so, or something like that. Yep. Because I didn't realize, it sounds weird, about like there's a mission right before that part in there too, where like you're kind of going through like almost like the factory area or whatnot and so on like that, and there's just a copious amount of guys there. And I didn't realize till about like I was like running out of ammo so bad. I'm like, I barely got anything left. And I was like, oh, I can switch to the Russian guy and play as him, and he had like 55 shots or something like that. I was like, oh my gosh. So I learned that. And speaking of which, going towards like that other part, or actually I want to say, going back real quick, there is that stealth part there that we were mentioning halfway through that comes before that level. I literally just went straight through, and I was like, I'm not even gonna find ammo. I don't even care. It's like, really? Yeah, it was one of those ones where it's like that part is, because I died once on there, and I was like, nope, this is just not. I'm like, I'm just gonna get out of here. I don't want to waste my lives on this. I think I grabbed like 2 things, because there was like some boxes you just pretty much run across, and I was like, that's it, good enough for me. Yep. But towards the end though, is I literally did get caught by that stupid plant monster that killed you in one hit. And what I did is I was like, I saw him coming, and I switched to the Russian guy instead. And I was like, I'll get him from here. And then she grabbed Moira, and just like I just saw her getting slammed. I'm like, I thought the computer would have been smart enough to get away from that. Yep. Nope. Yeah. But I got lucky on that last battle. I literally did, because there's a part like you're fighting all those guys, and 2 of those plant guys come at once. You open up like one of like the warehouse doors, and you go inside, you grab a couple things of ammo, and then all of a sudden a bunch of guys come. I actually hunkered right in there, pulled the sniper rifle out, and just blasted those things from afar. And then like when they came close, I chucked a couple of Molotov cocktails at it, and it just it worked out. I did not think it was gonna work, and it just happened to be fine. And that's the end of that thing. You beat that, boom, it's done. Yep. So you were literally one enemy away.
And that's what I'm saying, bro. That it killed me. One quick question though, because in that warehouse there's a rocket launcher in that warehouse with 1 round. Does that exist?
There's a rocket launcher in there? I didn't see a rocket launcher in there.
Yeah, it's so when you walk in through that door, you're on that elevated platform. It has that little pit, that you jump down into, which is what I was literally just talking about, where that monster warped up to me. He was down in that pit. So at the end of that room, on the right-hand side, up against the wall, there's a rocket launcher sitting there with 1 round. Does that weapon exist anywhere else in the game?
Probably not. You probably could maybe buy. You probably can maybe unlock it, if I had to guess.
Raid mode, I would assume it's probably
raid mode. But I don't think it is in the game, to tell you the truth. It's probably just like, in a sense, the rocket launcher that Claire uses at the very end.
Yeah. Because I think it's ultimately there for these extremely tough enemies towards the end of that encounter. So, anyways, just a quick comment. I did notice that existed. And so yeah. So that one's just it's kind of a tough one, but it has some neat stuff in there and so on like that. It's definitely the challenge level for sure. They don't call it the struggle for nothing. Oh yeah. I think it's generally good. I just got, because this was after a weekend of playing through the totality of the campaign, leading into this, because like I just had the extra amount of time, because we were gonna pod on Saturday or Sunday or whatever, and it didn't work out this past weekend. So I was like, cool, I have enough time to like play through these couple bonus episodes. I can do a little bit of raid mode, have some kind of context to talk about, and then that happens, and I'm like, nope, fuck it, I'm done. I completed the campaign. That's good enough. No thanks. So please explain Little Miss, because I did not do it.
So Little Miss is pretty much I wish you kind of did play because there's part makes me laugh so hard in it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so you're playing as Natalia, and this is pretty much the story of how she gets from the lab pretty much to Barry at the very beginning of the story mode.
Okay.
And so you're there, and then there's Dark Natalia with you the whole time, and it's one of those ones. Is like, is she kind of a figment of her imagination or something like that? You don't know because you can play as Natalia, and you have to sort of stealth go around the enemies, which sounds like it should be terrible, but it's actually really it's done fine. It's done like that, kind of like challenging yet forgiving, because when you die, you literally only go back like the checkpoints are actually good at this point.
Right.
And then Dark Natalia, actually, she can run through the entire level and none of the enemies see her, and then she can mark them for you so you can have regular Natalia know where they are. So it makes it kind of a little bit easier and so on. And it's got this weird thing because like there's like the bear, like Natalia's bear or whatnot, like the stuffed animal, and the stuffed animal's leaving these postcards along the way. But the postcards, I just bust up laughing every single time it is, because it's like there's like the bear, and it's like, Natalia, you left me here and so on like that, and it's getting dark and scary, and I'm thinking about killing myself. Oh no! And it's like they always start off kind of like that, and then all of a sudden it gets really dark. Like, and then you find another one. It's like, I found a river. I think I might be able to drown myself in here. Why won't you find me, Natalia? And he gets more and more beat up as along the way. Like, I can't help but laugh.
God,
I just like
dude.
the voice that they give. It's so funny.
Yeah.
But so you just kind of go through there, and for the most part, it's just sneaking stuff. It adds a little bit more kind of story context of like how she gets there and so on there, and maybe there might be some other stuff, because like, along the way, like that Dark Natalia girl is just like literally like, she's just literally like bullying Natalia, like, who do you think you are? You think you're good enough like this? You're just gonna get killed by these monsters. Like, what are you good at? And Natalia actually doesn't die. She's like a Pokemon. If she gets captured by stuff, it just says she fainted.
Yeah.
Funny. Because there's one enemy we kind of forgot to mention that's in Barry's camp. It's actually in Claire's one too.
yeah.
But there's those invisible fly things and whatnot that Natalia can see and stuff. And these things will do one hit kills too. These fly things.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yep.
So you got to watch out you don't accidentally run into them when they're invisible and so on like that, because they'll one hit kill you or one hit faint you if you're Natalia. But yeah, they're kind of interesting ones too. But they actually would always get me kind of freaked out whenever they showed up, because I just didn't want to get the one hit kill. But
Yeah. One quick comment about that enemy type, and I'm glad you brought it up. So one visual effect that happens when those things are around really gets under my skin, not in a bad way, like in terms of like horror, side of things, because it's like this screen effect that like starts just like vibrating like super hard, and you hear it, and especially when you're playing with headphones, because this game has very, very, very good sound design in my opinion. I didn't have to use Natalia very much to identify where they were. Like you physically can't see them, but due to the greatness of the sound design, I was able to like hone in, just with my character, just kind of aiming, and then just kind of like honing in. I think you're right here. Bam, you see a little bit of blood squirt out. Okay, take it out real quick, and then take it out real quick. You are right. That is another enemy type that will take you out in one hit if you get too close.
yeah, so those ones will kind of get you. Well, because sometimes too, I've just accidentally ran into them. Like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, like that thing, it goes brrr, and then boom. If you keep running, you're like, oh, it was right there, not like it was a little bit of a distance away. But So there's always those, but so yeah, in the Little Miss, you just kind of go through areas, and it's kind of stealth. It's a little bit shorter, maybe about like 45 minutes to go through the whole thing. Definitely interesting and so on like that, but nothing too radical. And as I said, it's very forgiving. Like, so if you get caught by a monster, whatever, you go back like just pretty much one room, and that's it. You know, so it's like, okay, don't go that point, just wait a second. But once you kind of get it down, you're like, oh, I can fully run. I don't have to crouch and everything like that. Monsters can't hear me. It gets a little bit easier than one would think, But it's kind of neat. It's fun. That one feels more kind of just like a bonus thing, but still kind of cool. It said the teddy bear is the best part, though, just because he's so suicidal, yet he's like, where are you, Natalia?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to kill myself. Yes, I will.
It's just the fucking suicide teddy bear.
Suicide teddy bear and so on.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, if that wasn't enough, the raid mode in this game is like, the raid mode's already pretty big in the Revelations 1, but this one, it has even more kind of junk in there too, like twice as many characters. I think it's like 200 levels or something goofy like that.
Yeah, it's
and
insane.
the weird thing too is because raid mode in the first game literally just uses the same levels as like the story. The raid mode in this one just has a bunch of like made up levels, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the small amount that I put into raid mode just to see it, more or less. Like, yeah, I mean, like it's I don't know. I think it's great. Like I'd actually like to. We've talked about this a handful of times of like maybe kind of recapping some of these games and going back and playing like their raid modes or their mercenary modes and things like that. Because it's the one piece that I'm missing with majority of these Resident Evil titles so far is like I've touched them, but I haven't like played them. Like I haven't like put enough time into them to really have an opinion. But again, more unlockables, more, like high scores and how quick can you do stuff and blah, blah, blah. Like, I mean, there's a lot of challenge things you can do in this mode seemingly and whatnot, which is pretty neat. But yeah, I mean, I'd say that if you liked raid mode in the first game, you'll absolutely love it here. If you like mercenaries in general, across the series, I think you'll well love this, so.
Yeah, and the thing about the raid mode is like this is where the multiplayer really kind of shines because that's like the best way you want to play it is you play it co-op, you'll have a really good time.
Yeah,
because I remember that even like when this game kind of came out and playing the raid mode, I was like, oh, this raid mode is extremely good on here because I think at this time period when 2 initially came out, I don't think Revelations 1 had the re-release. It was just still only on 3DS. So raid mode, I guess it was multiplayer, but I had to find somebody else who had a 3DS and that game. Good luck.
Yep.
At that time period. So I didn't notice that one as being like a multiplayer one till later down the line. But yeah, it's like it's one of those ones like if you just want to have some really good fun co-op, whether you do it split screen or just even like across the internet or something like that, like the raid mode on both of these games is so much fun, like any mercenaries and so on. But yeah, that and a whole that's Resident Evil Revelations 2 right there. There's actually a lot going on in it, and that's what I mean is. Coming back around to the beginning when I was talking about how Capcom kind of undersold this at like a $40 game and so on like that, you look at it, it's like, dude, it's got more content in here than like most games deliver you. It gives you a full story mode, bonus little side missions, and a humongous raid mode that's pretty much a game in itself,
Right. Yep. Yep, I agree. I mean, I think that this is yet again like not my favorite Resident Evil title out there, but it's serviceable. It does its job well. It tells stories of characters that we really didn't know a whole lot about. Like we know who Claire is and we know who Barry is leading up to this point, but we really don't know those characters. That's the number one point that I think was made here is that the character development was very well done. I enjoyed the new characters. I enjoyed this plot well enough. Locales, locations, different combat scenarios, enemy types, all the stuff that we covered in this episode, I think is very serviceable. Again, I've historically on this podcast have put kind of a number on things at the end of our episodes. I'd be very comfortable giving this like a solid 7. I think it's really good. I think that if I played more of the raid mode, it'd probably give it another point, maybe up into the 8. I think that if the whole game was like Chapter 3, this would be easy. This would be a 10 out of 10 game to me. So, but again, tonally, that's the reason behind that. So.
Yeah, no, I just think this is one of those ones where it's like, yeah, it's kind of, I thought about too, just looking at the mid-generation Resident Evil games, and if I had to compare it, it's probably actually my least favorite, if I had to say out of 4, 5, 6, Revelations 1 and 2, because that's what I kind of consider the mid-generation ones. But that's not saying anything against it. You know what I mean? It's still really good, still offers a lot of great survival horror-ness, and I think it's also, kind of one of the most underrated Resident Evil games out there. Same with Revelations 1. I think both those ones are just very overlooked. And I think they're better than certain, numbered series for some of them too.
Yeah.
And granted, people play them. It's not saying that they're not popular, but I just don't think comparatively, I always felt like they always kind of got a little bit overshadowed by the numbered games.
Yeah. Well, I think that Capcom has a prime opportunity at this point if they want to continue doing Revelations in terms of a sequel. Granted, at this point, like so much time has passed, like it might be a little bit of a moot point, but like tell the story of Ethan in between 7 and 8. Just make it, make it in the RE engine, make it first person, tell the story of Ethan between those 2 chapters. Take ideas like of what we have, for this type of game, and really run with it. I think there's tons you can do with a non-numbered, like a Resident Evil 9 or a Resident Evil 10 or whatever. You know, like a Resident Evil Revelations 3 is your avenue to experiment, have fun, you know, create something wacky, and tell stories that like may or may not need to be told. You know, like this, I don't think this story needed to be told, you know, for the totality of Resident Evil, but add some flavor text to it, you know, and make me appreciate the characters and in the overall story of Resident, you know, and in general. So again, I think if they're going to do a Rev 3, like, yeah, absolutely. I think that's their starting point should be the story of Ethan. You know, let's learn about Ethan more. You know, or you know, if they want to backdate to something else, you know, post this or whatever, even go back to the original plot and just like continue that story, something. You know, I'd love to see a Rev 3. Absolutely.
Well, the one I've always thought is if there was a Revelations 3 is because they mostly always seem to use kind of classic characters, I notice, in it more than anything else, is I was like, it's a perfect opportunity to use Rebecca again.
Oh, sure.
I think would be Revelations 3, have it be Rebecca, and I always thought Rebecca and like Carlos. There's like two characters that kind of don't get enough like, you know, light and so on like that. Is have both those ones and somehow, some way they kind of come together and have to work on a mission together and so on like that. And I thought that would be always kind of cool. And it's kind of a bummer that the Revelation series kind of got. It felt like once the RE engine came out, that's what Capcom put all its effort into and just didn't care about too many side projects. Because oddly enough, like past that point, Capcom got very simplified in like what they make. They only do a few games like, you know, here and there. You know, it's like Street Fighter, Resident Evil. They did a Devil May Cry. They probably won't do another one of those for a long time. And just a few other things, and that's kind of about it. You know, Capcom doesn't do too many other series for the most part. You know, I guess they did Dead Rising and so on like that, so you had that there. But you know, for the most part, not too much. So, but it'd be nice to have that kind of come back. You know, and I guess what sort of took over the Revelations section probably for development time was the remake games.
Oh, 100%. Yep. You know. And I'm glad those exist. You know,
yeah,
like
I'm not complaining there because, you know, especially the remake of 3. That's like, I love that one so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, 4 and 2 is really good too, but the third one, I just love the living daylights out of that. But yeah, as I said, it'd be cool to see more of these, just more kind of little smaller side stories and so on like that. You know, why not? Even if they came out on a weird platform or something like that, I'd be kind of even fine.
Switch to exclusive.
Yeah, well, why not? You know, I mean, I miss when Resident Evil was a Nintendo exclusive. It just felt right. You know, I mean, it was like one of those ones. It's like this just seems like how it should have been from the beginning. It was like it should have been a Nintendo game the whole time. The same way, like when they finally put Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on like the Switch. I'm like, it just feels so much better in a Nintendo controller. It does not feel like it should ever have been on PlayStation. You know, finally, it's like it came home.
Right.
You know, but yeah, Revelations 2, you can literally grab this on like practically any system, which is kind of cool. PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, yada yada yada. I think it literally used to be on Stadia at one point, so it was on a variety of things. But it's a great game, definitely worth checking out if you've never played it. And if it's been a long time since you've played it, at least pull up the raid mode because that's just super fun. Quick and easy, you know, and action-packed good times. But yeah, we'll find another good old survival horror game to come back to, you know, and go from there. But Resident Evil Revelations, if you want to see more of that stuff, just let Capcom know that we want a third one at some point. I think that's what we need. Just because it was a cool series, you know. But beyond all that good stuff, you can always find more of the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. Till then, I'm Spencer Scott Holmes.
I am Cameron.
And we'll see you some other time.